I haven't heard back from Kelly.
I'll make sure that goes live because
Okay.
She's here.
Kelly's there?
Yep.
Okay, good.
I'm here.
Thank you.
My phone, the Metro PCS phone lines are all down, so we're having a hard time making or receiving calls.
we'll make sure that goes live because
Kelly's there?
Yep.
Okay, good.
I'm here.
Thank you.
that explains why I can't get a hold of my parents. I thought they didn't pay their phone bill.
The Metro PCS phone lines are all down, so we're having a hard time. Making or receiving calls.
Make sure that goes live.
Kelly's there? Good. Thank you.
That explains why I can't get a hold of my parents. I thought they didn't pay their phone bill.
The Metro PCS phone lines are all down, so we're having a hard time.
All right, we're streaming on YouTube now.
Okay. And I can turn that off, or I mean, I can close that screen, right?
Yeah, you don't need to keep it up.
Okay.
I'll have my headset on, but I'll be walking around the house. So if anything drastic happens, shoot me a text.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
All righty. Everybody have fun.
I think we lost Michelle.
Oh, we did.
Vince, does Chief White need speaking permissions?
I would have them available, yeah.
Okay. Chief, you are now able to speak.
Okay, thanks, Jake.
I still have Michelle on my list, but I don't see her.
I see her again.
Okay.
It keeps logging me off and I have to keep going back in and I don't know why.
Is anybody in your house like streaming Netflix or anything like that? Or where it would drop out?
Nope. He would not know how to do that. Nope.
Do you have Charter or Comcast?
Comcast.
Okay. No, Charter has been going down for me quite frequently recently.
Wow. Well, if you lose me, that's why I'll get back in.
Michelle, as we have everybody, it looks like.
Looks like.
And yeah. Okay, I guess it's, I'm looking at the time. You have 6 o'clock?
I do.
Okay. So it's 6 o'clock at this time. We'll call the City Council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Here?
Whitman,
Here.
Echoangeli,
Present.
Vining,
Here.
Germaini,
Here.
Lamore,
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here. So on our work session this evening, Mr. Pastu, you have 2 items I know you want to cover and see if there's other items that may come up. But if you would, we'll start right there.
Thank you, Your Honor. Make sure I'm unmuted here. So I'm going to pull up an outline that I had sent earlier today. Hopefully everyone can see that outline.
Mm-hmm.
This is in part kind of a conversation that we started last fall, kind of evolved as well after the first of the year and clearly lost some momentum as the pandemic set in early mid March. But working through the outline, we started in the context of a neighborhood service program. And so in doing this, we'll find our way down to a discussion related to rental inspection and also blight abatement, which will be really the focus of tonight's conversation. But I thought it'd be helpful if, considering the context of where this would fit into, say, a long-term plan related to a neighborhood service program. So, I'm going to just rattle off, some of the objectives is certainly to improve the quality of residential housing in the city, primarily south of the river and east of Telegraph. Certainly looking at our low mod income areas, working with our GIS specialists to track where our housing rental programs are. My sense is intuitively, they're probably going to be right in those areas. Second is look to address housing rental conditions in identified areas to improve quality, safety, property values, aesthetics, and mitigate the negative impacts on nearby single family owner occupied homes. Third objective, aggressively address blight abatement and enforcement. 4, develop and initiate Orchard East sub-area plan, something that we currently have in the fiscal year budget. And we can talk a little bit later about that. Implement the NEZ zone, communicate the plan, implement due on sale inspections, recruit potential homeowners to take advantage of the program. 6 is solicit grant funding for neighborhood improvements. 7, evaluate opportunities to acquire dilapidated properties through delinquent property tax foreclosure process to demolish and make ready for infill development or other public purposes. And then the last item I put on there was to develop and implement strategies for infill residential housing throughout the city. So, long term, that's kind of what we would look at with the neighborhood housing program. Before I proceed, let me know thoughts, comments, questions.
Any questions or comments from the council? I know I'm on partial screen here, so I'm not sure I'll see it.
Oh, you can't see the whole thing?
That's okay. Don't have to change it. I'm sure we can get through the work session here by council members that have questions. Councilman Eklund has hand raised. I see it's typed. Councilman or John, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to tell Vince this is long overdue.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your patience. Let me, if there's any other thoughts, comments, I'll move on to the next section.
Yeah, Vince, I do have one. Yeah,
I have something, but Brian, go ahead.
yeah, please. Just a quick question. The NEZ zone, is that specifically what you're targeting, or are you targeting other areas besides the NEZ zone?
Well, I think part of it is, let's just start with, there is, certainly with the rental housing is primarily south of the river where our biggest problem is. And I think that's an area that we need to obviously address and attack. The NEZ could be, anywhere throughout the city, though, I think. And certainly there's areas where we could communicate with that eligibility and how that can be used as part of the strategy, if you will, to even infill in certain areas. And I think of it as too, as John, you might help me on this, is that even if it's repurposing existing rental homes into owner occupied.
Correct.
Yep.
So Vince, my question is on the NEZ, and I think you said it there that there is components within the NEZ that are maybe an offer to the homeowners that are there. But if it's been a while, as we said, if we could have the NEZ maps either resent or just give me a direction where it is on, I think it's on the city's website. Maybe that would be helpful for the council to go look at it, because there are components in there that we can do, but I think that these objectives are outside the NEZ as well that could be done, but little different components. So thanks, Vince.
Okay.
Other questions from council members or comments? I don't see any other hand pop-ups on my screen. All right, Vince, if you want to continue then.
Okay. The second part of it is just implementation. part of it is, again, I think a broader context of what I think, future community development department would look like. That would include the neighborhood service department. But, clearly right now we have building inspections, facility maintenance, planning and grant services. I see that as those are three separate items. And then I think, what's happened is we would look at greater reliance on consultants for plan reviews, and then any kind of even specialized type of studies, much like what we've been doing here the last few years as well. And then clearly historic preservation is a critical component of that process as well. I put in bold and italics neighborhood services, and I put previously rental inspection program. But I also think long-term economic development could be moved in there at a later point. And when you look at the different areas, downtown development, Telegraph Road corridor, River Raisin Heritage Corridor, Brownfield development, Port of Monroe, general economic development, certainly working with the Monroe County BDC, and then even the Orchard East corridor. There's a lot of elements in there from an economic development standpoint that I think in the future may be appropriate to move under that departmental heading. So carrying on as part of the implementation, that gives you a little broader background where I think we should be heading, and then get into the neighborhood services. And I use this as initial implementation, rental inspection, broken into, I think, 6 or 4 different areas, starting with inspection frequency and other considerations. I put in there 1-year renewal, but I also know that we have a number of very good landlords that'll have the capability of being waived if compliance record is clean for 2 consecutive inspection periods. Otherwise, I think you go on a 3-year basis. We would have to prepare a waiver application for review, approval, denial, and or appeal. So, but I think, what you don't want to do is punish those that have done good. And this may be a mechanism when we get there, how we could handle that. Clearly, we would need to add the unregistered units, of which we know exist, considering a possible amnesty period to register, give them notification. We know who you are, where you're at. Now's your time to get in before the program begins and penalties can be levied. Review and evaluate the affidavit requirements that we have. A lot of this has to do with renting to family members. Anecdotally, it's pretty loose and probably, from what I hear on occasionally, abused. And that's something that we may have to review and maybe tighten up a bit. And then last on this portion of it is require landlord provide proof of insurance sufficient to cover cost of demolition related to natural or man-made event. I think certainly our experience recently with 229 Harrison is an example of some of the challenges with that. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions with that first phase, maybe even the last item. City Attorney and I have had some discussion on item number 5.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Ryan?
Yeah, regarding number 5, what legal boundary do we have to split there to make that happen? Or is it possible to, is it something that they have to carry the insurance or not?
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Buds?
Mayor and Council, I have done the initial research regarding the requirement to provide insurance, and I believe in a properly structured ordinance, while always possible that there could be a legal challenge on that basis, that it would be permissible, and other communities have included a requirement that in order to qualify under their inspection ordinances, that the liability insurance would be a requirement of being properly certified under such an ordinance. And I think that that is something that could be included if council desired in the proposed ordinance, which I believe was the subject of a prior motion and is an ordinance that is in the process of being drafted.
Don't mind, I just, another question regarding that. I'm being the devil's advocate when I say this, but what if they say they don't care if they're part of the rental inspection program? They don't want to have the insurance. They don't want to pay for it, whatever. Is it something we can still mandate to them that they have to have it or not?
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, please.
The requirement to participate in the certification for rental units is, I think, as maybe Councilman Icoangeli said earlier, part of something that is probably somewhat overdue and maybe an allocation of resources in order to doing that. It's sort of a two-step thing. It's one, requiring that all rental units be certified and taking the appropriate enforcement actions to ensure that that's occurring. And then secondarily, having insurance as part of the requirement to get your certification, being the follow-on. And I think we'll talk a little bit further in this discussion about ways that we might take a stronger stance in enforcing against those that do not properly participate in the rental inspection process.
Thank you, Matt.
And if I may, Your Honor, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the enforcement section down a little bit further.
You want to continue? I don't see any other,
Okay.
I don't see no other pop-ups at this time.
All right. So, you know, we look at the staffing. We would look at having
Losing people
full-time.
here.
I'm sorry.
Vince, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Yeah. I think your video froze, but I can hear you fine.
We may be having an issue with the mayor and connection there.
That's what I'm wondering right now. Can you hear me? Nope, I think we may have lost him.
Could be that his computer will try to reconnect here in just a moment. I'd suggest under the policies and procedures we had for remote meetings, we give just a moment to see if he'll reconnect there. And if not, Councilman Icoangeli would be the designee to take over the responsibilities to conduct the meeting. I'm going to step away for just a moment and see if I can make connection with the mayor.
Mr. Buds. I'm disconnected, but. Okay, well, I will, if you, Councilman Icoangeli could kind of continue the meeting, I'll get back on for visual or for video. Thanks.
Okay, with that said, from the mayor, Mr. Pastu, do you want to continue with your presentation?
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about the staffing. Again, right now we've got a combination of inspectors that are involved, but I do think you have to have a full-time inspector dedicated, toward the rental program. And particularly as I get into enforcement, talking a little bit about someone with the ability to write good, coherent reports, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll get some support from other building and trade inspectors, which has been the case over the years. Full-time administrative position, which is currently in place, and then support from other community development administrative staff as needed. The program oversight would be initially with the community development director until neighborhood specialist position is established and funded. So I think ultimately what you want is, and I'll talk a little bit about it with rental inspection and blight abatement, but that's probably going to be more of a neighborhood specialist, I think, oversight and responsibility long-term.
Anybody on council have any questions relative to the staffing component? Mr. Vince, my question is, do you believe that one full-time inspector is enough based on the number of rental units that we have?
No, that's why the support from other inspectors, I think is going to be necessary. And some of their work has got a certain ebb and flow to it as well. So I think there may be times of the year, for example, now they may be a little busier than say in the winter months and what have you, doing some inspections. So there is an ebb and flow to the workflow and interject them as need be. But I will say, if I may, if there's a need and the revenue stream proposed for funding of this is necessary, then we'll come back and approach the council for additional help if that has to be the case to stay current. I mean, we got 2,700 rental units registered. That's a lot. Now, some of them are larger multifamily complexes, but at the same time, that's still a lot of units.
Well, if I may, that was the reason for my question. Based on the
Yeah.
number of units, will one person or even somebody, 1.5 people, have the capacity to inspect all the units on an annual basis?
Well, I think, when I looked at some of the printouts there is that a number of them are pretty good. Some of the larger complex, the ones that are the more problematic ones are the larger traditional single family homes that have been converted to multi-use residential. Those are the ones that I really think our biggest challenge.
Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Councilman Michelangeli. I think maybe to answer your question, that it may help that some of these people are going to be able to, or be eligible to be inspected every third year. Am I correct in hearing that? If they pass through the first two, they get the buy in the third, and then after that we go every third year. If I understood that correctly.
And that's what would be proposed. And we actually, right now, I'll be honest with you, there are some landlords that we have no problems with. And if they were to apply for, a waiver and they've had good, compliance, then there's no need to punish them by going annually.
Right.
At least that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, it's still a lot of people to, a lot of rentals to inspect, but I think that may help cut the load down a little bit by having that.
Yes, yeah. Well, the other thing with it too, and I didn't go into any of the finances, and in part the discussion for tonight is, let me know if we're on the right direction, because there'll be, some more information, finalizing some budgets and details with that. But I will tell you, I can see recommending more CDBG money going into this, particularly on the front end to go hard and address the rentals and some of the blight abatement. And I think given where we know most of the problem is, they would be in areas that would be eligible because of the low mod district that they're in, the census area. So,
Councilperson Germaine.
Vince, when would the compliance records start? Would it start at the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1? Someone had a clean inspection for the last 2 years. Are they waived? How does it work?
well, part of it is we would have to develop a transition plan based on some of the inspections. For example, if somebody had a 3-year inspection that was done in 2019, everything has been fine previously, we would find a means of transitioning and probably send them, okay, if you want to do it annually, you're going to be doing it annually unless you submit an application for our consideration, in which case, we can consider it at that point. But But you know, at the end of the day,
And
I think
the-
there's only going to be a handful of those that are what I would consider problematic.
And is there going to be a cost for that application?
I would not recommend it for the waiver. No. For the
Yes.
inspection, yes. Yeah, but
Yes.
for the waiver,
Yeah,
I don't want to
okay.
discourage those that have been good landlords to request the waiver. And candidly, I don't want, you know, I want the city to be on the high ground, even if they're not such a good landlord. Don't let that become the issue. The issue is, have you been a good landlord or not? And then if not, then we'll deal with it from there.
Any other questions on staffing?
I have a question. I hope we can hear
Oh,
me.
mayor's back.
That's okay. I wasn't sure it got through. Vince, I want to make sure I'm in the right location. You're talking about the staffing and
Yep.
positions. Do we have any existing support that's outside maybe this department that is, I say, contributors to whether it be staffing or maybe it's down later in the item with the abatements or reporting is, I guess, maybe the better way to say it. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but looking at how.
Pretty much, Your Honor, right? The staffing that we have now is within the community development department. We haven't used too much. I can't think of any resources outside of the department in this area.
Maybe it's in the reporting side that I'm thinking of. John, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please, Your Honor, take over.
Oh, so I'm thinking, and maybe I'll wait till we get into some of the reporting aspects of that and how really we everybody has potentially a role of what they see and how we take a minute to get that started instead of delayed process of some of the actions. But I'll wait for that for later. See if there's other questions from the council. I see no other hands. All right, Vince, go ahead.
Okay, so enforcement is really, I think, going to be part of the key to all of this for it to work is, you know, and I think part of it is putting together in place, you know, enough legal support to make sure that we carry that out if there is someone that basically thumbs their nose at it. I think Councilmember Lamore asked, well, I don't want to play by these rules and I don't care. Well, there is a process. And so, you know, I think that's part of what needs to bring this into compliance. What the recommendation is establishing what's a civil infractions bureau. And I put it as a kind of creating an administrative panel. I kind of at times had referred it to quasi judicial, really not that, but it's also under by statute, the supervision of the treasurer. And so, you know, city attorney and I've talked a little bit about what the limitations are, and clearly there will be a need for additional follow-up, you know, pinpointing some of that responsibility or the limits of that. But, you know, I do recommend that if we set this up, a 3-member panel, including the police chief and or an alternate, and then possibly, I don't know if we have a council member or two or a couple of individuals, you know, from the public, but it's in a couple of alternates. But I will tell you, initially, I can see this being very active, a couple of meetings per month once to get this off, because we got a lot of ground to catch up on. So, but my sense of it is they've got to be somebody pretty strong and be able to, you know, deal with some landlords who aren't going to like this at all. So,
John, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. Vince, is there a requirement for a civil infraction bureau require the police chief to be a member?
no.
My suggestion is that I'd hate to put the police chief always in a position where he's got to be the heavy. You know, personally, I'd rather have an administrative panel with a couple council people, maybe even a citizen that's got some expertise in construction and whatnot. But my thought is in today's world, I don't necessarily want to subject the chief of police to being on an administrative board that looks at civil infractions.
Yeah.
From a public relations point of view.
And you know, somewhat I've struggled with having council member on there, to be honest with you. You know, whether it's a zoning board of appeals, which I've always discouraged council members from being a member of, this may have a similar type of thing. But I think what you have to have is somebody that's got a pretty thick skin, because this initially is not going to be a walk in the park. So I think that's part of, I think including the chief or one of his command staff as a member on that. So. So next part was what kind of appeals they would be hearing. Certainly any infractions, citations that have been written, and fines. So some latitude that they may have, fix the problem. And I think you're in a position to waive, recommend waiving the fines. Appeals related to the 1-year registration waiver, and then the appeals related to an affidavit of eligibility that I talked about. So I kind of would see that the scope of what this group would do as pertains to the rental inspection requirements. So the next part is just some of the notice and communication. I think each citation obviously provides a process to appeal, no charge, but must submit application. And I do, I think in terms of a quasi judicial type of appeal, if someone is that you would literally have someone prepare a written report to the Civil Infractions Bureau talking about the violations, probably accompanying with pictures. I would anticipate a city attorney representative there with that, and then the appellant would obviously have an opportunity to make their case before this board. But I really think it's important to develop a very strong record of what the violation is, and also to establish that this bureau gives an opportunity for an individual to remedy whatever violation that they have. And then the other part of it is, and I'll talk a little bit further, is if this does go to court. Now, the Civil Infractions Bureau is not going to be the end. They still have the alternative to take their case to court, but it does create a very strong record for the city attorney to take before a magistrate or a district judge, whoever is to hear the case regarding the citation. The other part of it is if there is a notice, there's part of me that just wonders, well, should we notify property owners within 300 feet? I think all of us have heard complaints from adjoining property owners to let them know at least this is being considered. And then there's part of me that wants to televise it. There's a strong element of trying to shame into compliance some of these property owners, if that's possible. But I also think it's important to send a message. If we're going to do this, we're not going to go half baked. We got to, rattle the cage pretty darn hard. And so, I think those two combinations, do they come with some cost? Absolutely. Is there value in it though? That's the question. So. And then the purpose obviously is just to try and resolve any problems before going to court. As I said, create a very clean record, should that be necessary to seek court action. And then again, create public awareness that the issues are actually being addressed. Thoughts or questions, comments related to that? Okay.
Any inquiries made here on the screen, so.
Okay. So as we've talked about, a little other considerations, refuse collection, I think, charging these multifamily houses an additional amount after the first unit. If there's a house that's a 4-unit detached home, that they would pick up the cost of 3 of those because they are functioning more like a commercial operation. I would recommend also, similar to other commercial, if you have an apartment complex, you got to handle your own refuse, that they eliminate the unlimited pickup for these multiple family houses. If they have to dispose of any material, that's cost is on them. We can obviously arrange with our contract hauler to make a special pickup and then bill them directly for that pickup. We've had the discussion, I think even last fall, about, charging a portion of it. I'm still of the opinion it shouldn't necessarily be the full amount, because the full amount includes unlimited pickup, also includes yard waste and recycling, of which is not likely to be a part of the service that they would be receiving. But, that's one of those things that we can talk about the implementation of it. And then another topic, lastly, with the rental end of it, is consider limitations for on-street parking. Allow one. We know that in some areas that's a problem. Is that the housing rental units basically clog up some of the on-street parking and certainly inhibit some of the traffic flow that in these residential neighborhoods. Comments?
Questions or comments from Mr. Pastor?
You want me to go on?
Yes.
Okay. Is everybody able to follow the screen as well?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Okay,
not
good.
any, concerns.
So the next part is blight abatement. Certainly focusing on high grass, junk, garbage removal, abandoned vehicles, working in conjunction with the police department. I think those will be the primary areas of focus with blight abatement. We do have a full-time code enforcement officer who also does some rental inspections, a part-time code enforcement officer, typically works full-time in the summer. He's off with surgery at this time. And they're being supplemented by the other inspectors. We get some support from the other building trade inspectors as needed. The support from community development administrative personnel will be needed for the code end of it. And then again, similar to the other item, long-term, I would see this under the neighborhood specialist position, but initially the community development director would be responsible for oversight of the operation. From an enforcement end, again, increase legal budget, also establish civil infractions bureau, again, under the supervision of the treasurer. This one would be similar, where I'd recommend at least a 3-member panel, but we could talk a little bit about that. Their purpose obviously would be to hear citation appeals. Notice requirement, very similar to the other. As far as notification, I do think as part of the televising, you could actually probably have 2 different agendas related to a meeting, one dealing with rental inspection issues and the other with blight abatement. And then the purpose, again, resolve problems, create a clean record should we end up in court, and again, create community awareness. The other considerations, change to the high grass ordinance. We have an 8-inch requirement for violation, which is very high. Most communities are at 6-inch height before that is. And then obviously would issue the newspaper to be issued in March. What you would get is a much more frequent mowing of these, either by the landlord, property owner, or it could be a private single family owner. But you're not going to wait till it gets to be 8 inches tall before taking action. And then I think we would look at a review of administrative costs, similar to what we did with a few years ago with high grass complaint, to make sure that we're not subsidizing, taxpayers aren't subsidizing some of this problems with the blight abatement. So, but the focus of it was to once we went through the initial framework of what community development reorg and neighborhood specialist position would like come into to do what we could take, I think, from an initial standpoint, focusing on rental units and blight abatement, and then work through the rest of it. Part of this, I just want to make sure if we're on the right page, more to come, start the implementation process and provide some budget, but I know we're going to have to increase the rental inspection fee. We certainly have to do an amendment to the resolution. We would have to use some more funding from CDBG. And again, kind of reviewing other aspects of our code to start this implementation.
John, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. I bear with me a second. I'm looking something up real quick.
Okay.
Want to make sure I get the citation correct. I would suggest, because this occurs primarily, like Mr. Pastu said, this occurs on the south side of the river, east of Telegraph Road. My suggestion is, rather than keep pulling money out of the general fund, that the city consider using it's a public act. It's called Public Act 208 of 1949. It's called the Neighborhood Areas Improvement Act. It's rarely used, but it's pretty effective. And the key to it is that it allows the city to establish a neighborhood, put together a strategy to improve the neighborhood and put together a budget, and then use special assessment to levy a special assessment against all of the properties within the neighborhood improvement area. So for example, if we're going to commit, 2 staff people, one for blight and one for rental inspection, and then we have additional legal services that we're going to use, plus the cost for a civil infraction group with the notifications and the television. The city manager said there's going to be some costs there. We add all those costs up, and then we spread that over a special assessment over all the properties south of the river. And even if it's a couple $100,000 based on all the properties, it's only going to be a very small amount for each property owner to contribute as a way of improving their neighborhood. So I live on the south side of the river, so I would be happy to contribute to a fund that provides these positions to address blight and rental inspection and all the other stuff that we're talking about, but spread it equally amongst everybody, like on a front foot basis, which the city assessor could do relatively easy. And so maybe all of us pay $10 or $15 a year, but it doesn't come out of the general fund. It comes out of the neighborhoods that are being, that are part of the neighborhood improvement. So I would suggest that we use that type of technique. It's basically, we're all in it together. We all contribute towards it. The idea is to make our property values higher in the long term. So, it's not only against rental property, but it's against owner occupied property. Because if the rental property increases in a neighborhood, so will the value of owner occupied property. So, based on what we're looking at with, reductions in state revenue sharing, the issue with DTE, going through the decommissioning, which we've already agreed with, I think we have to start coming up with other funding mechanisms in order to accomplish the programs rather than always going to the general fund. So I would ask that we take a look at Act 208 of 1949 as a way of funding this program.
We'll take a look at it, sure. And that's part of, I think, some of the follow-up is, what does this budget look like? If you think we're on the right track, we can start putting pencil to paper and come up with, because part of it is you're absolutely right, is you're going to see, okay, this is a portion of it that's going to involve the building fund. It'll involve the use of CDBG money, housing rental money, the general fund, and possibly now if we use this neighborhood fund, because there's going to be at least, right now it's at 4 different funding sources that we have, and they do come at the expense of other potential uses, particularly the general fund and the CDBG end of it. So
I'm just, Your Honor, I'm just concerned that based on the number of rental properties on the south side of the river, and the ones on the south side of the river primarily converted single family homes. North side of the river, there are a lot of apartment complexes. And then between the blight issues, the high grass issues, I think we're talking more than 2 people. I think we're talking, we may have to have 3 inspectors that just focus all of their attention on these issues.
So, Brian, you have a question?
Yes, more towards Councilman Michelangeli. Would this include their rental inspection fee, or is that over and beyond that?
Well, I think the way the act is set up, the property owner that owns rental property would pay for the rental inspection. The neighborhood act, the assessment would pay for the staffing that does the monitoring and follows up on the inspections. And then the rental inspection fees would go against the budget. So we prepare a budget, the city administration would say so much is coming out of the revenues from the inspections. We need X number of dollars to fill the gap. That's the amount that we do the special assessment with.
Okay.
But I think the way that the act is set up, like I said, it's rarely used, but it's out there, is that it requires the planning commission to create a neighborhood betterment plan, which is kind of what Vince is talking about, why we appropriated 20,000 in the budget to do the Orchard East sub-area plan. So technically that's a neighborhood betterment plan. So it's kind of in line with what we're doing. It's just that act is out there. It's kind of like what we do in our annual millage, where we assess everybody in the community the money to generate up to $50,000 towards economic development. We started doing that when Mark and Annette came on board, probably 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I know on my tax bill, that's like my contribution's like $2.85.
It's not much.
Yeah, it's not much at all. So I would suggest that we look at it so we're not continually pulling money out of the general fund. That, we have people in the neighborhoods that want to improve their neighborhoods, they contribute a little bit towards it. Thanks, Your Honor.
Thank you. Vince, I have a question on the other considerations here. And first off, the grass height. I think, we wait till it's 8 inches, and then as it reaches the process, next thing is 12 or even higher. So I'm not opposed to the 6 inch, because at least it gets things started in a timely fashion, which gets me to our reporting app, which is my Monroe on the go. And I report some, and then I know we chatted about the process of, then I get back that it's closed, but I know that's not been cut. So I'm looking at, is there a way to say that it's this? I don't want more steps for the staff. I don't want more that they have to do to close something else, but it just, the residents that do report it, it's closed, and they look at it for 2 or 3 days because, it might be a card holder or a card doorknob holder hanger, or it might just be it's not on the list to be done. And I know there's those examples that delay. So is there a way to adjust that? And then I also think when we have some of these, and I know I've reported them, they're the same locations, and I don't think that we're going beyond hanging a door hanger more than once, but they're bank owned, or they're unoccupied, they're pending demolition. I mean, they're clearly on the list, and I think the not only the inspectors but the staff that's responding and disseminate those, which ones they are. So I'm just curious, is there a way to, one, have the app give a better status for those reporting, and two, a way that we can move forward on those that continue to be the ones throughout the summer that that they're just not going to get done, and we know it. Just a thought.
We did change a little bit
Okay.
a couple of years ago with how we provide the notice, and I do think the door hanger actually worked out well. If you recall, we used to have a lot of complaining. Well, I never got notified about the high grass, and yes, as a landlord or property owner, it's still your responsibility. But it did bring into a lot more compliance with that. And I do think that there is some benefit, again, being on the the high ground when it comes to that end of the enforcement of it. But we also sent out, although this year I don't believe we did because of the pandemic, we had sent out letters to all the property owners that we had billed the prior year for high grass, as well as all of the rental inspection property owners that say, look, here, you're on notice as well. We posted in the paper in late April, and to start May 1st. And so I I think the timing, once the notice is out there, and maybe what we do is in the future, once you get your first
Right.
door hanger, after that, there won't be any more. You're on your own. You know, that will probably shorten up the time period. But I will tell you, the first year I was here, all I heard is, well, I was just about to come in and do it, and it got raining, and, you know, blah, 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 and all these sob stories. So haven't had those lately by going to the door hanger, but at the
once
same
we send it
time,
once,
what's that?
I said, once we send it once, I just think that we
Yeah.
have to tell people to cut their grass. And
Well, part of it is too, is when, and this, you know, they actually have a good record of it. You know, when I had started is, if you have this civil infractions bureau and somebody complains, okay, here's the pictures that were taken by the code officer showing of the violation on such and such a date. You know, you got a short period of time to, you know, make an appeal, but, you know, that appeal is come and gone. It's a legitimate complaint or a legitimate, you know, citation, because you've been well documented and measured by the code officer. So
I know John has a question, but what's the time frame once we hang the door hanger that the expectation that the contractor is coming out?
48 hours.
Okay, thanks. John?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. I think one of the things with blight primarily is education.
Yeah.
And even though I think it may be passed, I think it would be beneficial in the future, like when the summer, well, let's not even do the summer tax bill because that doesn't go to everybody. We got about 9,000 properties in the city. So it would take, you know, it's going to cost the city about $2,400 in postage. Why don't we send out to every property owner a piece of paper saying that these are the things that you can't do? The ones that I turn in all the time are, I turn in requests where there's grills on the front porch, which are against the code and a fire hazard. People that put living room furniture on their front porch is against the ordinance. There's high grass. The big one is lately in the last couple of years, I don't know where this trend is coming from, but it's parking in the front yard on the lawn. There is the yard junk, where people just dispose of stuff on the side or the back of their houses. And the other one is the shopping carts. But some people may not know. I mean, there are people that have moved into this community from other areas, either Lucas County, and I know that there's been quite an influx from southern Wayne County into Monroe, that they may not know that these are code issues, but they are. So, you know, part of it is kind of educating people on what they can't do. And I don't think a lot of people watch the government channel, and a lot of people don't subscribe to the Monroe Evening News. So I think the only way that we get this out there is by mailing it to them.
Well, I will tell you that, if I may, Your Honor, City Attorney Matt Buds and I had a conversation about, initially that last consideration was to move up the enforcement to April 15th. And he says, there's something in the statute, although I think, Matt, you said it has to go certified mail, right?
That's correct. So as a bit of background, the grass cutting comes from I believe it's entitled Noxious Weed Law in the state of Michigan, which has a provision, and I can get the citation in just a moment, but basically says that there's sort of a directed approach, which is if the person that's making the decision on the grass is too high, makes that decision, and you send a certified mail notice, that can come at pretty much any time. The statute envisions that if you're going to use a newspaper publishing as a date, to determine then that all grass after the May 1st date is going to be cut. That's in statute that goes through a process essentially at that point in time that is driven by the statute.
But again, the communication end of it's still probably, you know, as I say, we can look at that cost as well of notifying people what is code compliant and what is not.
John, follow up?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. I think the other thing for the city manager, Vince, is that if this is going to be a kind of a strategic area for the city in terms of really focusing in on blight and on rental housing and just improving the neighborhood, I think it's incumbent upon the city staff that are out driving, the police, the fire, the DPW, to start recognizing where these areas are at. I mean, they're driving the town every day. We have the apps where they can fill it out and send it in. Is that our city staff need to be educated on what some of these issues are, like grills and furniture on the front porch, people that are parking on the front lawn. You know, how many vehicles are driving the streets where they go by shopping carts that are thrown, you know, that are parked at the intersection. I just don't think it's incumbent upon the council to be the watchdogs. You know, when I see all the city vehicles that are driving around. I mean, I'm at a point where it's like, you know, for every violation a city employee turns in, they, you know, give them $1 in a log, and at the end of the year, pay them for all the citations they've turned in as a bonus. Do something. It's like, you know, our folks are driving around to pick this stuff up. I mean, I don't expect them to pick it up. And what I mean is, they should at least know how to turn it in so it gets to the right hand so it can get resolved.
John, I'll just say I agree. I don't think we'd have a bounty, but I appreciate the thought. But it is the comment that I've had, and maybe that was my earlier where I was alluding to, is we have a lot of staff that go by, and some are impacted, whether it's earlier or later on, that every report is going to get things moving, and we have to have the staff to follow up as well. That's where it comes into the structure. But everybody, if they're reporting, we're going to be able to tackle this sooner. I give you the example that we talked about here recently as a council, and of course the fire chief supported in what some of the complications were there on Harrison, and that had been reported previously exactly for that reason. The debris around the house, and you know, I've reported that twice long back ago. And last week I reported another one. If there's a public safety response, whether it be police, emergency, medical, fire, whatever it might be, they will not get through that front door, and there's no space on the side of the house to get through there. So John, I agree with you. I think that as we see those, I'd rather we get everybody involved at the front end at the opportunities when they see it to simply go to the app, as a wait to when there's I'll say an emergency, and then have a problem. And the last thing we want to do is have employees put in jeopardy because of that. But that blight of the front porch and the sides there's another one that'll be reported here this week when I get back by and see if they have or haven't addressed it. But I agree. I think there's ways that it doesn't take a lot of time to snap a quick photo or just send it in. It takes less than a minute. Vince, any thoughts?
No, I think there's some ingenious ways that we can get people involved with that. So we'll put our brains together and see what we can do from a reward standpoint.
Your Honor, I'm more than happy to, whoever turns in the most violations, I'm more than happy to give them a gift certificate to a local restaurant for dinner for two as a contribution to this effort.
Okay, well, I see Mr. Bud smiling, so I'm sure there's some conversation going to happen there. But on the other hand, I do appreciate and understand what your focus is. It's not really about rewarding people to go out and do that, but it's recognition of how we address our blight and other violations, and to help move forward in the community of cleaning things up. I agree. Vince, I know you're at the end of this presentation. We still have another item, so
Yep.
I'll see if there's any final questions for Mr. Pastu. I don't see any hands. All right.
So let me see if I can pull up the next item here. The heck did I do? Bear with me. I just had the doggone thing. What I want to do is pull up the goals and objectives here, and bear with me. shoot. Yeah, it's gonna take a moment here. Yeah, just a second.
Yep, sure.
All right, so I got it here on my end. I need to share the screen. Is that working?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, sorry about that little delay there. So we did obviously in late January meet and normally we review once in maybe February and then in March, and then obviously the events took us into a different direction for a period of time. I did include it, I think, for just as a background information when we reviewed the budget in late March. So basically, I took from what we received back as from Eastern Michigan University with their students. With that, had the goal in a broad sense, community development initiatives, develop community enhancement plan, which would optimize our community assets, recognizing the national park, Battlefield, our many local parks, Lake Erie, River Raisin, Wildlife Refuge, Heritage Trail, and airport as well. So part of it is just to incorporate that as part of our enhancement plan. And then part of it is also to look and recruit and retain community volunteers with that. So I'm trying to recall some of the thought behind that. I should have went back and looked at the notes before I popped this up today, but we were thinking in terms of ambassadors or community volunteers on boards and committees, that type of thing. But, and it may fall into, as you come down to action plan 4, which is welcome to Monroe, preparing something for new visitors, packets, calendars, some of the old things that used to get provide in the past for folks new to the community. But I also think item number 3, develop specific plans for various areas of the community. Clearly, the current year budget has, the Orchard East sub area plan John kind of referred to, as well as looking at other neighborhoods and some improvement plans that we could consider as well as part of that effort. So. Develop more affordable housing programs and policies. Again, we had some discussion with looking at some infill housing opportunities, working with former director Jim Tischler and Dave Allen with, trying to remember the name of his company right now. John, you just sent me from, what's that? Innovalab, right? Yeah. And so we're looking at some of that, but that's really what that would be. Upgrading affordable housing stock in the community. I think that kind of ties in with some of the effort that we talked about on the previous item. Direct communication with affected residents. Consider cultivate community as a model. A lot of good things came out of that program in the last couple of years as far as the cleanup and just the spirit of it as well. They identified the direct and city involvement with partnerships and assistance that Kalamazoo has done, and then implement a rental to ownership program, which would fall under the neighborhood improvement program as well. And discussion with developers regarding supportive housing, of which I think we're going to need to have a discussion here somewhere soon related to that. Thoughts, comments, questions? I'm going through these pretty quick. Okay. And part of it is normally after we've adopted these, part of it I also recognize the context of the times. We may very well decide if there's some modifications based on what's happened since we had our session in late January, that there may be some things that need to be revised, amended, maybe even added. So. Continue our economic development initiatives, prepare 5-year financial forecast. Obviously, Mr. Sull has done that as it pertains to the general fund. regarding our settlement with DTE. We do adopt a 2-year budget cycle that we have, and Ed's actually expanded it into 3 years now for all of our operating funds. Commit resources to city council goals. It's always been part of what we've talked about, using this as a foundation for budget development. Maintain adequate fund balance, which I think, the city of Monroe has done a very good job over the years. Maintain low legacy costs. We continue to, still provide and honor the benefits for retirees that we have, but also looking at other alternatives to deliver the same, possibly at a lower cost. I think we had a recent discussion related to that aspect of it. Continue to diversify our tax base. There is, and I'll talk a little bit more about it on the objective B, and try and maintain our service levels without millage increase. Part of it is, if I go back up to number 1, fund a capital improvements plan. Let me just say, you've heard me back last December talk about consideration, of a dedicated millage for capital improvements. And then I kind of narrowed it down to, well, let's consider one for residential streets. And as you understand, the need is clearly there. During the budget process, I said, well, I'm not sure if that's what we want to do this November, given the pandemic that we're in the midst of. But I never did force the question and ask the council, do you want to still pursue that? And put it out there for consideration.
That appears to be an ask. Is that an ask?
It is an ask. Yes, an ask is mine. Yes.
I see there might be some, John, and then I see that all the hands are coming up. John, and then I go to Andrew.
Thanks, Your Honor. Yes, I think that this is an opportune time. November is going to be a big election. There's going to be probably more people out voting. So my thought is, I think it's been in the newspaper several times. I know that the community is aware that we have the agreement with Detroit Edison that DTE is not going to be with us long into the future. And this is an opportunity to still maximize that tax base and improve the community before that tax base is gone in the future. So I think we should take a look at a millage for infrastructure, primarily for streets. Personally, I'm not adverse to actually allocating some of it, a small portion of it, to parks and trails, because those community assets are what people look for and could be an attraction for people to move into the community. So, but yeah, I think we should do it.
Andrew, you're muted, sir.
Sorry. I think if anything, we had planned on doing this before we anticipated any revenue loss due to state revenue sharing or the lack thereof. And so I think it's even more prudent now that we engage in something like that. However, we had talked in the past about forming a committee to review what the specific use allocation of the funds would be. I was wondering if we had done that, though I know that we had since put it on hold because of, like everything else, with COVID. I'm just sort of wondering from the city manager where we're at in that process, and if that committee has met and discussed the use and allocation of those resources.
Vince?
We have not. I think, after the first of the year, we were looking at the formation of, I think we had a couple discussions in January, and then I think there was some concern about, I think I had the police station in there as an item. And so from my end of it, I will tell you, it's the narrowing of it to local streets may be the easiest and most recommended. We still continue to provide and will in the future some funding out of the general fund. But I think as the tax base became tighter and tighter, we'd probably be squeezing more of that capital improvement allocation toward roads and less toward parks and some of the other things. And so if we had more of a dedicated local street millage out there, that I think that would provide sufficient funding to address some of the other areas as well. But we didn't set up the committee, and clearly as things evolved, wasn't sure that where we were at, to be honest with you.
Andrew, you good?
I guess, do we plan to going forward? We're going to make a decision on this because I know that in some of the internal reports, we had anticipated originally putting it on hold for the upcoming election.
Yeah. I will tell you that, and I think I covered it in my update, but in some ways, time's of the essence. We probably want to have something, if we're going to do some proposal, that it has to be adopted probably by our no later than the end of July in order to get it on the November ballot. It would be a charter amendment. It would require approval by the governor's office as well as the attorney general. And I suspect that statewide, they're probably going to have a lot of those to review, even something as simple as a dedicated millage. Yeah, we probably would have to. Now, having said that, if the interest is there, what I'll do is, work with Mr. Lewis as far as preparing, a summary list of projects, and we'll develop some proposed languages, for council to consider. And I say that because rather than just doing a dedicated millage, there may be some merit to allowing a portion of that to have a portion of it allowed for debt service. So you may get the benefit of a fairly large year of doing a number of streets just by having a contractor or two mobilized. So, but we would have to cover it in our next two meetings, to be honest with you.
Is it, Your Honor, if I may follow briefly? Is there any possibility of setting up a committee to meet later this week and bring something back to the council meeting, either our next meeting or the meeting following? Because as you say, we need to move fairly quickly on the specific language. I think a smaller group of people in a subcommittee format might be best for that. And I think that probably needs to happen
very quickly.
Probably tonight.
Brian, I think you had a question, and we'll get back to what we look for is getting the group together. Brian, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. I agree with Councilman Felder that if we're going to do something like this, we need to vet it out. I agree 100% that it should be thought out before we actually put something on a proposal. And whatever we do, just make sure it's very transparent to the voters what we intend to do with this. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to get many people voting for it. I'll put it to you that way. Nobody likes to see tax increases unless they know they're going to get some kind of improvement out of it. And I think we just need to, like I said, vet it properly and be very transparent about where it's going to be going.
Right. And I think that gives the message and what we've learned. We've been down that road. And I think that's exactly what has to occur if we're putting something forward. John?
Thanks, Your Honor. If we're only going to go with the street millage, then really it just comes down to getting the list from the city engineer and the city manager on what streets are going to be subject to the millage request and what their anticipated millage is going to involve on an annual basis. I don't know if there's I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if there's a need for a committee. I think the committee, initially, we were talking about an infrastructure millage that was going to include a variety of projects, streets,
right,
parks, public facilities, and now we've just honed in on local streets. I think it just comes down to getting the list from Patrick and from Vince on what they think is the streets that need to get, need to be repaved or reconstructed, and what it's going to cost and what that millage amount is going to be.
Ryan?
Yeah. Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea. I think that if Patrick's going to have that list every year, and that's what this millage is going to be based upon, just let the voters know that's how we do things. Obviously, a lot of that can be channeled towards the water line improvements, whatnot, that they have every year, and these can be just follow-ups to that. So, yeah, I think that's a fair way of doing it.
Other comments for Mr. Pastu? Nope. For now, we'll continue on. Vince, I know we're getting close. We have
Yeah.
about maybe 10 minutes at the, here to go. I don't think we'll get through all this, but at least we'll get through as much as we can.
You know, before for the end of the night, if there's a few council members interested in that list, we can get that out and talk through that. I don't have a problem with that. Actually, it's good to vet that through.
I think that would be a good start point to get the list out and to the council for them to review again. I know we have it somewhere in their past and in the booklet that came out, but we could send that and give us an idea of what we're looking at.
Yep.
And council can
good
and forward their thoughts.
All right. Going on a little bit further, economic development plan. Again, new businesses mentor program. We have a number of current projects that we're working on to get those completed. Prioritize pending projects. I-75 and I-275 and Telegraph. We have obviously the Telegraph corridor improvement with that. Opportunity zones, take a great advantage of that already. And there's more I think we could certainly use along the Telegraph Road corridor as well. Lazy Boy property, obviously the demolition is taking place. We're in conversation with the developer for a couple of different potential developments. And obviously Port of Monroe as well is a significant contributor to our long-term economic development potential here. So action item 4, increase collaboration with Monroe Township. We are having some discussion with them related to some partnerships and collaboration with them that could be hopefully mutually beneficial to all. I think, hopefully optimistic on that. And again, the last was to redirect DDA to refocus on main functions. So thoughts, comments, questions? And I say by main functions, it really is mostly related to redevelopment and infrastructure. And I think they're obviously interested in that. I think understanding some of that a little bit better. But historically, they've spent money in other areas, landscaping, those type of things. So optimize information technology. Looking at the clock here. Again, there's been, I will tell you that as a result of the pandemic here, that there have been great strides with departments using technology to help work with their customers, residents, businesses, and I'm pleased with the manner in which that's been embraced. And then just today, I was having a discussion with our GIS specialist about integrating the where we have the rental inspection or the registered rental properties in relationship to where the in the city, but also to overlay it with a low mod income area as well. So clearly with the use of IT GIS, I know with the police going with their report management system, that capability will be greatly expanded. Fire department's also looking at that type of an integration as well for their application as well. Thoughts, questions? Do we want to go on a little bit further, Your Honor?
If you can get through the next section, I-4, but we got really on about 5 minutes.
Okay. So we did talk at great lengths about organizational development, develop a succession plan. Over the next few years, we have some key personnel that will be departing. And so we do have to think about how we handle that succession, getting the right personnel in there, and not lose any of their institutional memory that goes with it. So that is, in some ways, I think, with the number of departments, something that city administration, me in particular, working with Peggy Howard, our HR director, could probably give council a succession plan, we think, that makes sense with that. Reviewing staffing, continue to review staffing and positions and what they, if they're needed and necessary. We did talk a little bit about the reorg with the housing rental program. If we go in different directions, you got to change some job descriptions, get the right people in to perform the services, develop a new staffing plan. And somehow I've cut something off there, and continue to improve our customer citizens relationships. We had a effort about a year and a half ago in that with some direct customer training for our employees. Need to re-engage some of that, but much of it has to do with some of the IT functions that came about as some of the recommendations from our employees and how they can handle that. And the best part of it is they owned it. They saw that as a way to help their interaction with customers. Review compensation and benefits for non-union staff. We did talk a little bit about administrative personnel, also clerical and others. To be honest with you, some of our policies and procedures are very dated. And I think going forward, as again, related to some of the succession planning, is we need to update a lot of our compensation and benefit plans to reflect what it's going to take to hire good professionals to fill some of these vacancies. Keep going.
Oh, we're not logging out. We'll just go right into the meeting. Is that correct? I'm looking for Clerk LaVoie's comment, see if she needs time for setup prior to that. No? Okay. I see it shaking no. So Vince, if we want to continue, I think we'll just
Okay.
a couple, 3 minutes or so.
Okay, improve employee service and accountability. Obviously identified public safety. One of the items that was mentioned, Joint Labor Management Committee to instill organizational alignment, negotiate sustainable collective bargaining agreements, develop a plan to recruit and retain diversity of staff, develop develop a cadet entry-level staff way into the organizations, and then maintain excellent response times simultaneously. I know that we have the public safety assessment that we were scheduled in March to have our meeting with. I think part of my update said, I think obviously it would be a closed session given the fact that any discussion related to that would involve any collective bargaining items. I can fit the council into the council chambers. Clerk Treasurer LaVoie and I kind of spaced it out. We could get 10 on the floor and 4 on the dais, and I think we can schedule it, and that's really what we probably should have some discussion about when we can get there. Public services, very similar.
Vince, I have a comment, and I see that Councilman Felder does. So Andrew, why don't you go with yours, and then I'll throw mine in there.
As we transition to having council back in chambers following COVID, if we're taking up the space on the floor to appropriately distance ourselves, question for against members of the community that want to attend the meetings, or are they still going to be televised so that they can view them from home? Or are we discouraging people from physically attending the meetings given the space constraints, or how's that? How are we making ourselves transparent and open to the public?
If I may, Your Honor, in response, the governor's order is for remote technology meetings is good through the end of this month. I'm not sure. I haven't heard one way or another whether it's being contemplated to continue that or not. But let's assume it was. I still feel comfortable if we were looking at a closed session that I could get council members and sufficient personnel on the first floor to have what I think would be a few-hour dialogue. But I don't know. It depends on what the governor. I think whether she issues an extension of that or not.
So we really are only talking about a solution for that particular closed session here.
That is correct. And maybe other closed sessions as well. There's an awkwardness I think I have with the closed sessions on, this remote technology. And so, we can have a discussion about it, but I do think we can make it work.
Maybe I was jumping the gun in anticipating the expiration of that order.
Yeah.
Something to think about. I'm sure you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Vince, just I have a couple comments on this section here, because I think some of the things that have done in the past or attempted in the past and some of the successes, but I think we can really expand in this area. And under 3, where it talks about recruiting or retain diversity of staff, I think about some of the conversations when in the former ALCC and some of the gatherings there that kind of have transitioned now with the MCOP. And I'd like to get in MCOP and talking about utilization of the Opportunity Center, of starting with the youth about opportunities within the city, not just public safety, but overall unemployment and jobs, and what the city is about. And I think there's a way to get that message. The second one on the develop a cadet and entry level staff, I think that's for police, fire, and medical. And I know that I'm trying to think of the exact number, but I think it's about 5 of our current public safety officers were cadets previously. So we really need to champion the cadet program in conjunction with the item on number 3, when we talk about outreach within our community, and not only getting applicants, but getting diverse applicants in this arena here in public safety, but also not missing opportunities for the remainder of our positions that may come open within the city. Cultivate here within our community to bring people into the work. So just a thought that I had as I went through those two, some notes I had. I don't see other comments. Do you have any, Vince?
Ready for me to go on
Yeah,
next one?
please do. Public services.
Okay, again, looking at labor management committee, instill organizational alignment, develop standards for customer service and courtesy, negotiate sustainable collective bargaining agreements, some of the elements that you saw with public safety. Staff training, continue to develop standards for customer service and courtesy. Continue cross-training. We've done that with a lot of number of departments where we are cross-training to the fullest extent possible. Continue staff training programs, utilize in-house training, train the trainer, and as the approach to continue with that staff development. And then last is maintain top quality administrative staff regarding management expertise, leadership abilities, some of those developments in those areas as well. I think this is create a communication campaign. Again, talking about telling a story. Everyone's an ambassador. Some of that, as I talked about employees earlier. Control our own narrative. Utilize both print and electronic media to tell that story. I think it's an expansion of some of the branding and some of the other features that we have utilized here recently. Community communication, utilize community opinion leaders to spread the message, create a community newsletter, create an employee newsletter as an alternative to continue that communication. We did incorporate in this current year budget funding for a lobbyist, certainly with many of the grants opportunities and other programs. We think that would be obviously of help for the city in many ways. And again, keep city informed regarding new relevant legislation, programs, and availability. Address perception about divided community. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then also develop emergency information program. We had an ongoing dialogue at the start of the year related to 2 events that happened last fall. One was a pretty major water main break over in Raisinville Township. Many people didn't know what it meant. We didn't have a great system in communicating what took place and who to contact. And then obviously we had the situation with the 2 officers shot there in Washington. And again, the internal communication and how that worked and functioned, not nearly as difficult as the first one, but clearly to have a good system in place, I think is important. And that's establishing the emergency notification. Now, I will tell you, Jody Egan has done quite a bit of work on this and testing it, certainly with the COVID-19 process. And so, it certainly falls into that realm.
So Vince, I know we're running a short time here before the regular meeting. I think council will have to kind of go through and digest this yet again. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity of being together to talk about these. And please send along thoughts to the city manager so he can share with us. Just one item in this area that I'd like to at least start off with. And I'm glad that we at least recognize under objective D the necessity of our community and some conversation that needs to occur. And of course, in light of as things have transitioned over here the last couple of weeks, when we look at national, but still in local as well. So I think that could be reworded and actually should be right at the top as this objective A, not that they're in any order, but it just puts it to the top about development, kind of a government or committee action group to discuss relationships. And I think that we have personnel that are adept and do a great job in communicating with our public, and yet I think there's things that we both can learn. And I think getting a participation from the community in the right sense, and when we can all get back together to address topics of importance not only to the city and administration, but also to the community, and take on maybe topics as they arise, but also for long-term planning of our relationships. So just that's the only one I have for that. I know we're only about a couple minutes out. If there's any urgency from the council members, we'll take that. If not, please send them in. Okay.
Is there anything else, Your Honor?
No, that was I just wanted to review that one. I think that's, if there's others, please ask the council that they'll send those in. I'll make sure. I thought maybe I lost you for a minute because it kind of got real silent, so.
Yeah, no. So with that, I'll take a couple of the comments there and work and make some revisions. Please let me know if there's some thoughts that you may have, and then I'll try and bring it back one more time before we adopt these goals and objectives.
That'd be great. So we do have at least the final business here is to close out the work session. I don't see any hands for any final comments. So this time I'll close the work session. We have about a minute. I'll wait for the clerk to give us the cue that it is 7:30 before we start the regular city council meeting. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, council members.
All right, Your Honor, it's 7:30, and I'm ready.
Okay. I'm looking to make sure we have all the council members on. I think we're missing one at the seat. Okay, we're good there. We wait for one more and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Okay, I think I see everybody that's, I see we have 33 participants, but I will call the city council meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Present.
Whitman. Here. Angeli,
Present.
Vining,
Here.
Yermani,
Here,
Lamore,
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Present. Next item, please.
I will go ahead with the invocation.
Thank you.
Grant us the strength to manage the challenges ahead and the wisdom to identify opportunities as we strive to serve our community. As we make decisions, grant us the gift of an open mind, the willingness to learn, and the humility to accept the ideas of others. Please help us recognize diversity as a blessing and unity as our strength.
Thank you. This time, if you join me and all the council in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
the flag
of
of the
America,
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
stands
one nation,
one nation,
God,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice.
liberty and justice for all.
It's always a challenge to time it right, but I know that it was said, so I appreciate the participation. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item would be any amendments to the agenda.
First, I'll look at the administration if there's any amendments or additions.
No amendments tonight, Your Honor.
Council members, any amendments or requests for additions to the agenda?
No.
Seeing none. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is under council action. It's item 2769, establish public hearing date for former Lazy Boy site, Brownfield plan revision.
Mr. Pastor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to have Mr. Cochran provide a little background related to this item. Mark?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Mark Cochran, Assistant to the City Manager in Economic Development. Tonight, we're bringing before you an amendment for the Brownfield plan for the former Lazy Boy headquarters. The Brownfield Authority did approve the amended Brownfield plan at its meeting last week, so the next step would be for City Council to schedule a public hearing for consideration of approving the revised Brownfield plan. So just a high-level overview of some of the significant changes that were made to the Brownfield plan. First, we did add the parcel at 1248 North Telegraph Road. That's the former restaurant, or the commonly known as the former Little Dixie, that's immediately adjacent to the Lazy Boy site. That was purchased as part of the overall redevelopment of the site, although it's purchased and owned by the developer, not by the city of Monroe. But given the fact that that parcel is part of the overall redevelopment, it's also a blighted, dilapidated, and on the verge of dangerous structure. So we're accomplishing its removal and demolition. There is going to be some abatement that has to be done, as it's a former gas station. We discovered dating back to the 1930s. So there's some abatement and remediation work that has to be done as part of the demolition. And we're working with AKT Peerless right now to get an estimate on the work, but thinking in the ballpark of about $100,000 between the abatement, demolition as part of the overall redevelopment. So that was the justification for expanding the Brownfield boundaries to include that property. The other significant change that we made to the site was increasing the amount of eligible infrastructure improvements to be repaid through the Brownfield plan. In the first Brownfield plan, we estimate about $1.8 million in infrastructure improvements. That of course includes roads, sidewalks, water, sewer, and some of the other amenities to the site. That was really just an estimate for the phase one of the redevelopment that's going to take place after the demolition is complete, and didn't take into account the entire site. And as the steering committee continues its work working on what the overall site design is going to be, we did increase the amount of infrastructure to about $5.6 million. Again, taking into account the entire 26-acre site, not just the phase one of the redevelopment. Given those additions, it did extend the repayment out by just 3 years, from 14 years to 17 years. And that assumes that we'll have state support for the state education tax capture. And then the next step that we're going to have after scheduling the public hearing, which we're asking for on July 6th, would be for council's approval of the Brownfield plan, and then to pitch it to the state of Michigan for their support. Hopefully keeping that repayment term shorter. If we don't have state support, it would extend it out a little bit longer. But again, those are the significant changes that we've made so far that are before you.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. I see there's two hands up, John, and then, I'm sorry, Councilman Michelangelo, and then Councilman Lamore.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I would like to make a motion that we schedule a public hearing for Monday, July 6th, regarding the proposed revisions to the Brownfield redevelopment plan for the former Lazy Boy headquarters site.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilman Michelangelo, supported by Councilman Lamore on item 2769, establishing the public hearing as stated. Any comments from council? Seeing Councilwoman Vining. You have a comment?
I had a question, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
For clarification, when Mark, when you say that the owner owns the property that you want to extend to. So are we doing this as a service to the owner of the property?
Yeah,
Extending this?
that's a good point, Councilwoman. So the way that the Brownfield plan is set up, the city will recoup all of our costs first related to the demolition of the site. And then the infrastructure will be repaid back. Yes, it is going to benefit the developer in terms of after the city is made whole, after the infrastructure is repaid, then the developer could recoup the cost of the demolition and the abatement work that's going to be completed on that site.
Okay. Thank you.
But the city takes first priority.
I understand. Thank you.
Great. Other questions or comments on item 2769? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
yes,
Echoangeli,
Yes,
Vining,
Yes.
Jermaine,
yes,
Lamore,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is 2766, Brownfield Bond Full Faith and Credit Pledge.
Mr. Pastu.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to have Mr. Sell provide background related to this request for approval for the Brownfield bonds.
Thank you. Mr. Sell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Many of the costs that Mark just talked about in the Brownfield plan, including the demolition, a lot of the site improvements that will be done there, will be funded through a bond to be issued by the Brownfield Authority. And at this point, we're still working on the cost of the site improvements. So the bond authorizing resolution that the Brownfield Authority passed last week authorized a bond issuance of up to $2.3 million. With a Brownfield bond like this, it does require the City Council's pledge of its full faith and credit behind the bonds, primarily to make them more of an investment grade bond that investors will be interested in purchasing. So that's the reason for this in front of you tonight. You're basically pledging your full faith and credit behind the bonds. The bonds are expected to be issued maybe by late July, but it could be a little later than that, depending on how we develop some of the costs that are coming forward with this. So that's what you're being asked to approve tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sell. Councilman Michaelangi, you have a question?
thanks, Your Honor. Ed, does this bond go against our debt limitation ceiling?
No, it doesn't. That was one of the reasons for going. Early on, we discussed whether to make this a city bond or a Brownfield Authority bond. And that was one of the main reasons for going with the Brownfield bond, is it doesn't go against the city's debt capacity.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Other questions? Mr. Pastu, anything further, or any other comments?
No, nothing from my end, Your Honor.
Okay, then we're looking for Councilman Lamore.
Yes, just make a motion, Your Honor, to adopt the resolution pledging limited tax full faith and credit in support of the City of Monroe Brownfield Redevelopment Authority Tax Increment Bonds Series 2020.
Councilman Michaelangi.
Support, Your Honor.
Thank you. There's a motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilman Michaelangi on item 2766. Any final comments or questions from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
yes,
Echoangeli,
Yes,
Vining,
Yes.
Jermaine,
yes,
Lamore,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is 2762, River Raisin National Battlefield Park Education Center Roof Replacement Bid Award.
Mr. Pastu.
Thank you, Your Honor. Over the last several months, we've had some discussion related to the condition of the roof at the former Monroe Multi-Sports Complex, now the River Raisin National Battlefield Park Education Center. The property and building are still owned by the Monroe Municipal Building Authority. The Building Authority did solicit bids for replacement, roof replacement, and some other repairs, if you will, to the structure itself based on the architect's evaluation of it. The bids came in on June 8th. There were 2 bids received, and the low bid with contingency, the low bid came in at $344,000. We put a contingency of about 5% toward that. We're asking City Council to ratify an approval of the building authority, since the authority will be the one that would issue the bonds. But ultimately, as you know, long term, once the last bond payment is made, it does revert back to City Council. We're asking for the ratification up to $361,000. We have do a little more work on. We had a question on that we need to follow up on, but given the timing of our next council meeting, which is 3 weeks away, plus the season that we're in right now, is probably the best time to get the roof repair. If we're satisfied as a building authority, we would like to proceed with those improvements or make some other changes if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Pastu. Questions, Councilman Michelangelo?
Thank you, Your Honor. Vince, the 361 includes the 5% contingency?
It does.
Do you think that they're, based on the complexity of this, that maybe that amount, if we're going to authorize it, it should be a little bit higher? Or are you comfortable with it?
I think we're comfortable with it, yes. Yeah.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion to authorize the building authority to move forward with the roof replacement at the River Raisin National Battlefield Park Education Center for an amount not to exceed $361,000, which does include the 5% contingency.
Support. More, do you have a question or second?
Question.
Question, and then we'll look for a second.
Thank you, Your Honor. Vince, could you tell me, does this include a warranty for that roof? Some sort of warranty? What do we have?
It does contain a warranty, and in fact, I'll be honest with you, we had a couple of contractors that did not bid that we were surprised by, and we're curious if it was a function of the warranty or if it was related to the manufacturer's requirements. So that, to be honest with you, is, but it does come with, I believe, a 25-year warranty, so, or 20-year, I should say. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
There's a motion, looking for a second from council.
Second.
There's a second by Councilwoman Whitman. Any further comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Michaelangeli,
Yes.
Vining,
Yes.
Germaini,
Yes.
Lamore,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 2764, purchase of 2 swap loader dump trucks.
That's it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll take a shot at this. Obviously, our Department of Public Services has been operating with some pretty old equipment, and one of the things they've been looking at is replacing, and a couple of them were just decommissioned a couple of years ago, but these are larger dump trucks that we have, and actually what they looked at is making them much more versatile for multiple functions, whether it's salt, using it for an attachment that would provide benefit for the forestry department and other types of uses within the department. And so what we're asking for is approval to initiate the purchase of these 2. It's probably a year lead time once you authorize the purchase of the cab and chassis before the product would be finished, but we would like to get this going. Mr. Lewis is on the line if you have any specific questions about some of the attachments and anything related to it.
Is
Is council wanting me to speak? Hello? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Patrick.
Okay. I was kind of waiting to see if anybody had any specific questions, but as by the way, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. As Mr. Pastu pointed out here, we had I'll call them our workhorse fleet, formerly consisted of 2 tandem axle dump trucks, and those were used on some of our bigger routes in the wintertime for like Monroe Street, North Dixie Highway, and doing the airport runway. And about 3 years ago, both of those were red tagged due to extensive frame damage, which would be kind of expected from a unit that was from 1991. So we've been kind of making do throughout because we were looking to try to, as Mr. Pastu pointed out, make our fleet a little more versatile. So these are kind of specialty builds, both of them. We're going to try to get one tandem axle and 1 single axle truck for now. We still have our fleet of 4 single axle dump trucks. Those are 2001 Ford Sterling, so those are not too long for this world either. But we want to try these out and try to see if we can shrink our fleet down from 6 total dump trucks to 5. And we've got a couple of the attachments too that are the forestry boxes, and those will help us potentially use those for some crossover, and that'll be the same type of thing when our forestry equipment comes due. We'll probably try to shrink down. We've got 3 other pieces in forestry, so we think maybe we get by going from 9 total between forestry and the ops dump trucks down to 6 or 7. So we are asking for your approval tonight for 1 tandem axle dump and 1 single axle dump, and each one of those would have 4 different attachments, with the common ones being the forestry box, the salt spreader, and then the kind of the standard dump body, with one having a flatbed and the other one having like a roll-off dumpster we can use for Blight. So as Mr. Pastu pointed out, it is roughly a 1-year lead time. So we're looking at the financing not actually coming due for almost a year on part of it. And we're going to pay cash for the truck chassis. So it's a 2-part D&K truck is going to be doing the chassis delivery. We'll pay those in cash once we receive it. And then the other truck and trailer specialties will build the prep the body for it with the hydraulic arm, some other prep attachments, transmission modifications, et cetera, as well as build the attachments. So I think that's a decent summary for now, unless there's any other specific questions.
I see there's 3 hands.
Oh,
Matt, it looks like the mayor's
All right.
frozen.
Yeah, that may be back.
there you are.
Well, maybe not. So Councilman Michelangeli that works with the details. If you would go with your comments and then work through the other 2, if you could.
I didn't have any comments, Your Honor, but I did have a motion. I wanted to try to simplify it. That we purchase 2 swap loader dump trucks and various attachments as specified in the fact sheet, and authorize the Director of Engineering and Public Services to enter into the purchase orders, and then also direct the Finance Director, Assistant City Manager to authorize and make any necessary transfers, including from fund reserves, and assign costs to the appropriate fiscal year.
Thank you. Councilwoman Germaini, did you have a question?
I have a question and then probably a second. What do we do with the old dump trucks? Do they get sold on the mitten? Do we get any value out of that at all?
Excellent question, Councilwoman. The 2 trucks that we're replacing these with are long gone, and we did sell those at auction. So at the time we weren't posting those on Mitten. We've had pretty good success with Rollo Juckett and Brad Newhart's auctions that are around the county. They're heavily advertised, and we've been using them pretty extensively the last 5-6 years for our disposal of our heavy equipment. So those are already gone, and those are already returned. The proceeds are returned back to the Storage Equipment Fund.
Thank you. Then I will second the motion.
Thank you. There's a motion.
Ladies and gentlemen, it appears that we may have the mayor freezing up for just a moment pursuant to the provisions of the resolution that was passed regarding remote meetings. We'll give that just a moment on a brief adjournment to see if the mayor's connection improves. If not, Councilman Michelangeli will proceed to administer the meeting.
Matt, may we proceed?
Yes, I believe that would be appropriate.
We have a motion and we have a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Michaelangeli,
Yes.
Vining,
Yes.
Jermaine,
yes,
Lamore.
Yes.
All right.
Clerk, please proceed with the agenda.
Item 2768, consideration regarding city attorney appointment and retainer approval.
Mr. Pastu,
City charter specifies that city council shall appoint the city attorney for a 2-year term. In October 2016, council appointed Matthew D. Buds with RCO Law as the city attorney. In 2018, a 2-year appointment was renewed through June 30th of this current year. It should be noted that Mr. Buds is transitioning from RCO Law to More Buds Law PLLC effective July 1. Administration is recommending the following actions related to the 2-year city attorney appointment. 1, to continue the appointment of Mr. Buds as city attorney. 2, that the city manager be authorized to sign the choice of counsel letter directing the city of Monroe's legal matters to be transferred to More Buds Law PLLC. And that 3rd, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the retainer agreement for city attorney services with More Buds Law.
does any of council have any questions regarding this matter? Madam Clerk, are there any hands that have been raised?
Councilperson Lamore has a hand raised. I don't know if it's for this item or not.
Councilperson Lamore,
Just to make a motion, Councilman.
please proceed.
Make a motion to approve the continued appointment of Matthew D. Buds as the city attorney, to authorize the city manager to sign the choice of counsel letter directing the city of Monroe's legal matters be transferred to More Buds Law PLLC, and to authorize the mayor and clerk treasurer to sign the retainer agreement for city attorney services with More Buds Law PLLC.
Support.
We have a motion made by Councilman Lamore and been seconded by Councilman Felder. Any questions from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the vote.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Michaelangeli,
Yes.
Vining,
Yes.
Jermaine,
yes,
Lamore,
Yes.
and Mayor Clark.
Clerk, next agenda item, please.
Before I go on, I did get word from Mayor Clark. He is working to get a different line going, so he will be here shortly with us again. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And for approval of payments, the amount should read $1,262,564.42. 1,262,564.42.
Does anyone on council have any agenda items that they would like pulled? Councilman Lamore.
Yes, thank you, Councilman. 2767, we can pull that one for further explanation.
Can you repeat the number, please?
2767, item number 2767.
We have a motion for the consent agenda.
Councilman Michaelangeli, if I may, just a moment, there's a hand raised from an attendee. I don't know if that was an intention to ask for a consent agenda item to be pulled or not, but I did want to bring that to your attention.
Mr. Buds, I'm not controlling the meeting, so could somebody ask the attendee?
Yes, give us just a moment.
So I allowed the attendee in question to speak. They would need to unmute on their part, I believe.
As I believe that he or she, it states that the name is Ashley, is unmuted. If there is a request.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Ashley Mulford, and I want to let you guys know there is a problem with people's here because I got attacked by the people on May 20th, and I was just walking with my dog, and the dog attacked me, and I am wondering if you guys can get the law passed where the dangerous weeds cannot be on sidewalks.
Okay. Thank you for your comment, Ashley. At this part of the agenda, we were asking the audience if they wanted to pull something from the agenda that we need to take action on. Your comment will come under citizens' comments later on in the agenda.
Okay. All right.
So we'll address your comments later on in the agenda. Thank you.
Can you please take this very seriously? Because this is a lot of children, this is a lot of bikers riding the bikes, and this is dogs with them attack.
Okay, thank you. We will address your comment later on in the agenda. At this time, does anyone else have any agenda item they would like pulled for further discussion? Seeing none, do we have a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Councilman, I'll make a motion that we approve all items listed under the consent agenda minus item number 2767, which has been pulled, have all their actions carried out and all of the actions recorded by the clerk.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilperson Lamore. It's been seconded by Councilperson Felder to approve the consent agenda and items with the exception of item 2767. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Michaelangeli,
Yes.
Vining,
Yes.
Germaine,
Yes.
Lamore,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Next item, please.
The next item is item 2767, consideration to approve second extension to mall property purchase option.
Councilman Lamore.
Yes, if we can just get thank you, Councilman. If we can get a further explanation on this action, I'd appreciate it, City Manager.
Yes, we entered into an agreement, probably 3 years ago with the property owner related to the property at the southwest corner of Kentucky and East First. I think notably you'll see the smokestack as well as kind of a concrete block there. They essentially at that time said after the owner had passed away, they're trying to clean up the estate and said, we'll give it to you. We said, well, we know there's some environmental issues with it. No, thank you, but we'll take an option because regardless of what was going to happen with that, the city would be involved in one process or another, whether it's involving with a brownfield redevelopment project, any kind of site plan approval and that type of thing. And candidly, we're in a much better position to try and market the property to someone that may have the wherewithal to be able to carry out redevelopment of that site. So there was a renewal last year, 1 year renewal. We actually did meet with the owners and their legal counsel here a couple of weeks ago, talked with them about some of the considerations and what we're working on to try and move this property forward. They were comfortable with it. And so we would like to do the, another 1-year extension. The estate's comfortable with it, and we think it's probably the right thing to do to keep evaluating and moving forward with some of the alternatives that we've been talking with recently.
Thank you. At this time, Mayor Clark, are you available?
Yes, I am back. Thank you, Councilman Michelangeli, and for everybody's patience. I guess it's a good thing that they live close to City Hall to get into this office. I understand that item 2767 was pulled for discussion. So I see there's a couple of hands, unless those have already been addressed, Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was just wondering, is this the former Mako site?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what sort of financial liability in terms of redevelopment are we, what are we biting off right now?
Nothing. The only thing that we're biting off is that we have access to taking the option, and it is an option that can be transferred, but we have a significant role in trying to see that it gets into the right hands when that opportunity falls. Candidly, one of the worst things that could happen is you can have somebody that buys it that has no experience and no capital, and you'll see that there for many more decades. So
we've certainly seen that happen before in the city. Thank you, Mr. Pastu.
Councilman Lamore, and then I'll go down the line.
Yeah, just making a motion, Your Honor, to approve the second amendment of purchase option for property located at 942 East First Street, extending the option for 1 additional year through July 3rd, 2021.
Councilman Michelangeli, do you have a comment or
I have a question, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Pastu, what's the purchase price that's attached to the option?
$1.
And we have the right under the option agreement to transfer it to another party?
That is correct.
Your Honor, I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Councilwoman Germaini, do you have a question?
Yes, is the site developable with the hazards that are on it?
We don't believe so. But I will tell you, and part of it is it's premature, but Mr. Cochran has been working one angle in particular that we think is very promising. And so, as that continues, we think that, it makes sense for us to continue this option, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Other comments from council? Seeing none, there's a motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Michelangeli, item 2767. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Michelangeli,
Yes.
Vining,
Yes.
Germaini,
Yes,
Lamore,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
I have no further items, Your Honor.
Okay, the next item then is on council comments, and Councilman Felder.
Question as to the format. I anticipate that there's going to be many comments from those wanting to speak this evening about one particular topic. I'm wondering if there's going to be a form by which to open up comments from council in response to that, or if the city manager and yourself are just going to field those and we will discuss it as council at a further date.
Well, I guess one way we could do this is if we wanted to hear the citizens' comments, and then if there was comments of the council in their comment time, I do have prepared for just a introduction regarding the rules of the chamber and ability for those that are joined us to make comment. I know that Mr. Pastu has a comment to make as well. So I'm trying to think logistically maybe the fashion to do that. If it's we want to hear the council comments. Want to hear the public comments. Obviously, as we know, public comments is not an item that's on the agenda, so it's not about decision making, but it's about listening to the public, what their view may be on whatever topic. But it's not about a debate or a dialogue, and it's but which fashion which we respond. If I'm looking at either Mr. I guess council, I'm looking at Mr. Buds also. If we would want to start there and then have council have comments after. Mr. Budge, your thoughts?
Your Honor, because of the way the agenda is structured, my preference and recommendation would be to have council make their comments, proceed forward. There's obviously time for citizen comments. That would not preclude any council member from making brief comment, I don't think, about that at the conclusion, and obviously then moving forward from there. But that would be my recommendation based on the structure of the agenda as it's been presented. Otherwise, I think a motion would be in order to amend the agenda in order to do that.
So I see Councilman Michelangelo, you have your hand up, but Councilman Felder, I know you had the question, so I'll see if there's questions from council, but I'm good with having council because there may be other topics or items that council wants to talk about. Gives us a chance at the end as well if there's any follow-up comments from council. Councilman Michelangelo, do you have a
Yes,
comment?
Your Honor, just a procedural issue. During the period of time that you were not online, one of the attendees by the name of Ashley spoke during the consent agenda, and it was regarding a non-consent agenda item. I told her that we would address her item under citizen comments.
Okay, I am sorry, you said Ashley, correct?
Ashley.
Okay, very good. So I'll make a note, and I know the clerk has that as well. I appreciate that, Councilman. So we'll, unless there's other thoughts, I think we'll move forward. Councilman Felder, comments tonight.
I will hold my comments for the time being and perhaps speak later. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Whitman.
I think I will hold my comments as well.
Councilman Michelangelo.
No comments at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Councilwoman Viney.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know there are a couple more demonstrations going on in the city this week, and I apologize, I don't have those dates and times, but I know you do. So just if you could speak on them during your comments, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Absolutely, I will. Councilwoman. Councilwoman Germaini.
Thank you, Your Honor. I had the honor of watching the funeral procession of Deputy Darian Young. And I just want to say it was a sight to see. Officers from all over the state were there to honor her life. And any other comments I will save for later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Your Honor. Once again, I would like to piggyback on Councilperson Germaini's comments regarding the deputy. My condolences go out to the family, obviously, and continued best wishes for Corporal Renee Peterson. And I'll reserve the rest of my comments for later. Thank you.
Very, very well. I think I'll make just a couple comments to start to follow up with Councilman Vinings. Yes, there are a couple of events that are occurring this week. On Friday, June 19th, with his Juneteenth Day. As I have it, there will be a peace walk at 4 p.m. I know some of the logistics are still being worked out at the start. I know that the conclusion will be at Loringer Square. There'll be an opportunity for some short comments as well from those that have been invited to do so. That is on Friday, June 19th at 4 p.m. And I would ask people to continue to watch the, I'll say the social sites that have posted this so we can, in case there's any adjustments that are starting. I don't have the exact route at this time. I mean, I've heard a couple different ones and I don't want to confuse, so I won't say it this time. The second item that's in our community will be a peace vigil. This will be at Munson Park on Saturday, the 20th at 8 p.m. I know that's being coordinated as well. Both of these, of course, within knowing, and I think just as we've seen the peace walks and demonstrations here, people have been very mindful of the executive orders on not only social distancing, but also the congregating. I think they've gone well. I think they've represented our community well, and the opportunity to hear and voice concerns within our residents, our community. So those are the two that I have. I'm not sure that Councilman Viney, if you had any others, I think those were those two. I'm just going to make, I'll make my comment now regarding the citizen comment time, just so if there needs to be a refresher, I can do so. But as we take public comments, whether they're be in council chambers when we are not doing virtual meetings, but now on Zoom through our virtual meeting, there are rules of the chamber, and I just would ask people to be mindful of that. So any person that's wishing to speak, we're going to coordinate that through the clerk, treasurer. I know Mr. Buds is assisting to make sure that we do not miss anybody, and they're going to be taken in an order as how they're just simply on the screen. And we'll move from one to the other that have comments, so we don't miss anybody, but we're going to make sure that we hear from everybody first as we go through. We'd ask that you state your name, address, but your city is sufficient if that's what you wish to say where you reside. We'd ask to make sure you be clear and concise. Unless council grants further time, the rules of our chamber here in the city of Monroe is 3 minutes. And we will be monitoring that to make sure that we get through the multiple participants that may wish to speak. As we always do in our chambers, we maintain a decorum. So clearly, if you have a comment to make, it's not about dialogue between others that are speaking. Simply state what your desire in your comment is, and what, so we can receive that. And if there's comments later by council. I saw that a hand came up for but we're going to get to that real soon because there's 2 more opportunities to speak, and I'll save the rest of my comments at the conclusion if needed. So Clerk Treasurer Lavoie, I think you're up next.
I am, and just to make you aware, Your Honor, Mark Cochran is also assisting Mr. Buds and myself to make sure that we get everyone. Now, Mayor, I have 3 letters in front of me, 3 emails that I have been asked to read into council during the council comment section. Would you like me to start with those, or would you like me to start with those already, in the Zoom call?
I think I see that Katie Beth has Davis has her hand raised. I know that there's as we're aware, there's 2 petitions that have been circulating regarding the Custer Monument. And I think hearing that as a start, if it's from one or both, but I'm looking at Mr. Buds raising his hand, so he's always here to correct me if that's necessary. Give me one moment, Clerk Treasurer. Mr. Buds.
Your Honor, the only thing I was going to say is I didn't know if the clerk treasurer had other comments or if the city manager did before we got to the citizen comment portion that I think the clerk treasurer was referring to with the written comments.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. No, I have no other comment this evening, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Pastu, I will go to you, and then we'll see, and I'll come back to the clerk to manage through the write-in, the letters that have been submitted, and then as we work toward those on the call. Mr. Pastu.
Yeah, I don't have anything for comment tonight, Your Honor.
Okay.
So, Your Honor, my other, and maybe Mr. Buds can speak to this as well. Ashley did begin her comments. I don't know if she had any others. I understand Katie Beth has her hand up, but Ashley did already start to speak. So, Mr. Buds, Your Honor, how would you like me to proceed?
I obviously missed that, what was the comment about? So if there's any direction, Mr. Buds.
Your Honor, I would say that comment is unrelated to a topic that we anticipate to take up some of the comments this evening, just based on what we've seen, I'll say, in news media reports. So my suggestion would be to have Ashley briefly restate her concerns so that those can be addressed. Previewing, I think it would be a matter for city administration to likely take some information on and then get back as far as a response.
That'd be wonderful. So Clerk Treasurer Lavoie, if you can note, I think it was Ashley that had called in my absence, and if we could start there.
All right, so I've clicked allow to talk, and I think, where'd she go? I believe is unmuted, so she can go ahead.
Ashley, you there?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
I on the May 20th, I was walking on Washington behind the laundromat.
Okay.
And the permits that has the people, they were walking out, and they did not hold their dog back. And then the dog attacked me. I wish I could show you how bad the bite marks were. And I do feel very, very strongly feel that people or Rottweilers or any of those dangerous breeds should not be on sidewalks, because this is children playing on the sidewalks, and this is bikers and young children walking on the sidewalk, and a very vulnerable wheelchair user.
Well, Ashley, thank you for your comments. I first I'll ask, I won't ask, but I'll see that hopefully a police report was made. I think we have your contact information here at the city, and make sure that we follow up tomorrow. So we may ensure that there is a report made through the police department, and that we also have an opportunity to follow up. Okay.
There is, but the problem is they lost the report of the animal control, because the person who took it, they didn't get in a car wreck, and they're not here.
So we'll see that the police department follows up. I'm looking at the manager as well with the animal control, and to see where we're at, and we'll be getting back with you, Ashley. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you for your comments. Bye.
And can I say one more thing?
Well, I'm looking at your time, but you're very close, but go ahead.
Can you guys try to ban peoples and Rottweilers in the city?
Well, I'll make sure that message goes to the city manager to see if there's discussion regarding animals within our city. We currently do not have any bans, but something we can look through the administration. So Ashley, thank you. And I know that we have other comments here this evening. So Clerk Treasurer Lavoy.
All right, so the next three, Katie Beth has her hand up again. Would you like to take that one?
I believe so. If we could start there, and then
All right, it's not quite in the order of the list, so I just wanted to say that. So if everybody starts raising their hand, then we have the potential to lose track. I'm not trying to discourage anyone. I'm just saying we need to pick up plan.
Very good.
Everyone has an opportunity. So I will go to Katie Beth next.
Katie Beth, do you hear us? And are you ready?
Now she's allowed to talk, and I believe she's unmuted on my end.
Katie Beth.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, please continue.
Perfect. My name is Katie Beth Davis. I am a resident here in Monroe County. I'm a supervisor at Erie Construction. I'm an activist and a member at St. Mary's Church. I'm also a mother of 2 children who attend Riverside School. I'm here today to present to you a petition of 10,146 people of Monroe County who have signed this, stating that we would like to have the General Custer statue that is centered in the heart of Monroe moved to a museum or more historically appropriate place. The people on this list include several community members, teachers, doctors, lawyers, government officials, business owners, and many much more, and some of you that are on the call today. Our community has been on a decline for the last 30 years. COVID-19 has only extended it into our small businesses. Lazy Boys laid off 850 people. Our outlet center is bare. The mall is surviving on a movie theater, and our downtown area has nothing that represents other ethnicities that live in the community. Systemic racism has always been here among us, and right now, with all of the negative attention Monroe is receiving, we really have a chance here to do something good to bring the community together. We could move that statue and put something in place that represents all of our members. Statues are being demolished and torn down by angry protesters all over the United States. Last week in Dearborn, there was a statue taken down of Orville Hubbard, who was one of their previous mayors known for being racially divisive. This statue was taken down by the city because it did not represent the community that lives there. Just today, the mayor of Detroit removed a statue of Christopher Columbus, who is credited with discovering America. Because we love our community, we do not wish to see it destroyed, but rather relocated. And if you want to keep it for the history, it would be better suited in a museum, rather than an obvious disrespect to the Bill of Rights, in which separation of church and state is actually a marriage in the case of St. Mary and the General. And if you want to keep the statue, you would have to have the complete history of the General, not just the parts that are glorifying him, so that anytime a child is playing in St. Mary's Park, they could learn about how he used women and children as human shields during his battles. That the man on a horse across the street from a church is responsible for the mass genocide of Native Americans. If you want to keep the statue, then you need to add something more unifying to our community that would ultimately represent all the different ethnicities and cultures that surround us. If you're going to keep the statue, you will be responsible for telling the members of our community, over 10,000 of them, that their voices don't matter, and that every time they come downtown or drive on Custer Road or play on Custer Field or have children who have to spend an entire week of their education based on a Custer, that the city of Monroe is represented by General Custer, a murdering rapist and racist, that there are no tributes or dedications to any other race in Monroe besides white. General Custer does not represent the people who live in here in Monroe. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. You were exactly at 3 minutes and 3 seconds. I appreciate your timeliness on the thing, your comments. Thank you for your comments. Clerk Treasurer Lavoy, next, please.
All right, one moment. All right, the next speaker, the next person wanting to talk is RJ Feist, I believe. And he's been enabled to speak.
RJ, are you,
Can you hear me?
yes, please continue.
Okay, the concern that I have with the monuments, and I want to open up by saying that, you know, in this endeavor that I have encountered or embarked on, I have learned so much about the history and the culture behind Monroe. So many stories of this land that I have not ever heard. And I am Anishinaabe. I am from the Potawatomi Nation. My people originally inhabited this land. And the one concern I have is throughout every single plaque and memorial, there is nothing telling of Potawatomi people. Potawatomi people were a rich, loving, and peaceful people who were spiritual. And even at one time, they saved the city of Frenchtown after the War of 1812, when the British ordered Frenchtown to be burned to the ground, and the Potawatomi stood in the way and stopped them from destroying the city. So why are we not embracing Potawatomi culture, as well as other cultures too? But it needs to start with the roots, with the grassroots of this community, and that is with the indigenous people. And that is all I have to say. Thank you guys very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
RJ, before you leave, so we can make sure that we're getting things as we should, your residence, please.
I live at 602 East 2nd, or 604 East 2nd Street.
Thank you,
Here,
RJ.
right here in the city.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Clerk Treasurer Lavoy, next item, and I'll try to keep track of that. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm just going to begin to go through the list.
Okay.
There is Amanda. So she's been enabled to speak if she chooses.
I see two on my screen, two participants raised their hands. It might be
Well,
down.
so RJ just spoke, and after I hit Amanda, Graham's hand went up. So we'll just see
Okay.
if Amanda wants to speak, and then I can go to Graham.
Okay, Amanda, are you there?
Hi, how is everyone? Thank you for your time. My name is Amanda Althouse. My residence is 518 Arbor Avenue. I just wanted to take a moment to express gratitude for the support for the vigil this weekend and make sure to invite everyone to Munson Park at 8 p.m. tonight, or Saturday night, I'm sorry. And also to voice my support for Katie Bett and her movement to move the Custer statue.
Very well, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clerk
So
LaVoy,
then-
next, please.
Oh, sorry. The next one will be Graham.
See Graham's on the screen. Graham, can you hear?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Ken, please start. Your name, address, or location.
Graham Denton, 217 West 2nd Street, Monroe, Michigan, 48161. I just wanted to voice my support too for removal of the Custer statue to a more appropriate place of history and not glorified in the middle of downtown. The context of why I'm speaking is I was born in Monroe. I've spent most of my life here. I went out into the world and got educated, and I returned to Monroe because this is where the people I love are. I plan on raising children here, so I'm invested 100% in Monroe. And as you can see with what's going on around you, there's probably obvious evidence of a great racial divide going on in this city. And I just think that if this city could get out in front of this and really denounce and go for that, you know, you've already got Dearborn, Detroit, all other places, that's 30 plus statues taken. And this petition too of over 10,000 versus the numbers of who don't want it. They think we're removing history. We're calling for it to be moved to a museum. People, history buffs of Custer and historians before tried the exact same thing. So I'm just not sure we're getting the message out properly. I would love for this to be on the agenda and for some action taken. Funding for it, I mean, you could probably crowdfund. It's probably more likely in this time in history than any other time. There's certainly tribes to get involved with who are actually massacred by him. I've been in contact with my tribe, the Cheyenne Arapaho, and they very much would wish to see the statue removed and placed in a museum or history of context. That is their official stance from our governor. He's kind of like a PM for a small country, if you will. But I'll allude my time to someone else. I know you guys have so much time. Thank you so much for hearing me. I really do appreciate you guys and the effort and service you do for the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Graham, for your comments. Clerk LaVoy, do we have other comments or raised hands?
I don't see any other raised hands, so I will continue to go down the list. There is one that's listed as anon, and I can enable them to speak. They'll just have to, you know, we don't allow anonymous comments at council, so, but I will go ahead and enable in case.
And of course, we'll be looking for a name and a residence location. So there's somebody that's listed as an on, so I'm assuming anonymous, but do you wish to speak? If so, you'll need to identify yourself. I ask again if you wish to speak. Hear no comment there. Clerk LaVoy, if you could
okay,
move forward.
Again, I see no hands raised. Let's see. Oops. Cole has just raised his hand, so I will enable. There, he's been enabled.
Cole, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. My name is Cole.
Okay, Cole, if you could name, please, and residence.
My name is Cole Bean. I live, do you need a full address?
No, no, just a residence, Monroe or.
Oh, Monroe.
Okay,
I
very
live, I
good.
believe, in Andrew Felder's district.
Okay, thank you.
I don't really have anything prepared speech-wise. I just wanted to voice my support for the removal of the statue. One of the things I did want to point out is if you go back and watch some of the news when we did our protests, our peaceful protests a little while ago, you can look at some of the comments of people who are laughing at the people standing underneath, specifically standing underneath that statue, because they know what that represents, and they thought it was quite ironic that we had to stand under that statue. So I just thought I'd bring that up and again, voice my support as a citizen of Monroe. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Clerk Lavoy, if you would continue, see if there's others.
I will enable Asia. Whoops, did I do it? Yeah. Yes, she's been enabled.
Asia, are you there? Can you hear us? And I think you're not muted, Asia. If you wish to speak, you need to identify and residence. There's some background noise, but I'm not hearing a voice. So that might be a communication line we can come back to as we continue on. Let's so if there's others that wish to make a comment, we can go there, and please move forward.
All right, let me make a note. So we.
Yes, please do.
All right, Kevin has a hand raised, so he's been enabled.
Kevin.
Hello.
Yes, your name there and residence.
Yeah, my name is Reverend Kevin Eccles, and I live at 318 Bentley Drive.
Okay, thank you.
I had, unfortunately, I'm asking for a little bit of clarification. It's not a comment in the vein of the others. I understand there was a special meeting to discuss the potential reopening for the Navarre and Dorsch branches last week.
Oh, yes.
And I wasn't able to find the minutes or the result of any action taken. So I was just curious about that.
Good question. I'm looking at Mr. Pastu because I know we did some, we started our reopening. I know there's some discussions on the libraries. Mr. Pastu, from our reopening resolution number 1, I believe there's some comments there.
Thank you, Your Honor. With both the Dorsch and Navarre Library, as my recollection is that they are only taking customers by appointment and also doing any kind of ordering and drop off or curbside type of delivery. Looking at Mr. Cochran to confirm that as well, because I know he talked with Nancy Belair, the county librarian.
Yep, that's correct. All the county libraries are only open for curbside service right now.
All right, thank you very much.
And Kevin, I will say, I know that just walking past the Dorsch, I know they were doing some drop-offs. And so probably the best thing is if you could, for an appointment, if you some services you're looking for, would be wonderful.
Sure thing. Thank you much.
All right. Clerk Lavoy.
All right. Let's see. We have, I see Mr. Saul would be next in line. Wait.
Your Honor, if I may jump in.
Asia is back. Asia has her hand raised, so I can go back to Asia.
Okay, before we do, is that what you were going to say, Mr. Buds? Very well. Asia, if you can hear, if you're just identify yourself and residence.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please continue.
Oh, yay, this is Asia Hawthorne. I live at 24 Murray Street, Monroe, Michigan, 48161. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you had a question about the details of the upcoming march on Friday.
Yes.
I am the admin on the NAACP's page, and I posted an event page. The march starts at 3 p.m. Or actually, we're convening at Oaks of Righteousness at 3 p.m. And Heather Boone, pastor, will be giving a prayer, as well as giving instructions as to what the protocol is and for behavior and expectations for the march. And there will be buses that'll line up at that point right after the crowd for those who are unable to make the walk. And the march starts at 4 p.m. and it goes straight down to Loranger Square. And all the route was cleared with Captain Tolstead. I believe he's a captain, correct? Monroe PD.
Yes.
Did you have any other specific questions that I can answer, or should I follow up with Michelle, with Clerk Lavoy?
No, I think this was, I just didn't want to misstate. Information I had was 3 p.m. as the rallying to start, and then 4 p.m. is the walk, but the details of the exact location I know was being discussed. So I appreciate your filling in that void so the people can start gathering at 3 p.m. at the Oaks of Righteousness after the prayer and instructions.
the march and walk, I should say, will begin at 4 p.m. to the downtown at Loringer Square. Thank you, Asia.
Exactly. You're welcome.
Clerk Lavoy.
All right. Bill Saul is next on the list, so I can enable if he would like to make any comments.
Mr. Saul, if you could hear us, your name and residence, please, and comments. Bill?
He's still muted.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
Well, he's enabled on our side, so he either doesn't choose to make any, or he may be having some technical difficulties.
Okay, so what's this? Well, I
He's
see.
unmuted.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
There you go. Mr. Saul, you have your name, residence, and then your comments, please, mindful of the 3-minute time frame. Thank you.
I'm Bill Saul. I live in LaSalle, Michigan. I'm a lifelong member of the Monroe County area. And I'm commenting on the fact that these folks that are wanting to move the statue have now, the history of the whole statue project was built in 1910. And it was done early in Michigan history. And actually, Libby Custer was a part of this whole project. And I think we should get more history into this project rather than just discussion about moving the statue. We should learn a little bit about Monroe County and learn about how George Custer was involved in the Civil War and how he was involved in this freedom of the slavery projects that were going on with Abraham Lincoln. And I would just like to comment, if there's persons that are interested in removing the statue, I think the first thing we should do is get together and have a history lesson so we can understand what's actually going on. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Saul, for your comments. Clerk Lavoy, next.
Okay. All right. I don't see any additional hands raised, so I'll continue through the list. There's a Julie. Julie's been enabled if Julie wishes to comment.
I see Julie D. Julie, if you're here, if you can hear me, your name and residence, please. And comments. Julie, appears you might be muted on your end.
So again, Julie may not want to comment, or there may be a technical issue.
Okay, well, just for now, I'll set that aside before we can and come back if there's if it raises a hand or a desire again.
All right.
Further?
I'm enabling Moto G7 Power.
Okay, Moto, your name and residence, if you wish to make comments, you need to unmute and do so. Okay, see it's still muted for their end.
Would you like me to go on?
Yes, please do.
All right. Graham, Julie, Katie, Beth. Mr. Micka, Richard Micka is next. So he's been enabled here. And I do have an email from Mr. Micka. I don't know if he would prefer that to be read into the record by the clerk or if he wishes to make comments.
So, Mr. Micka, I'll give you the choice if you wish to speak and read your letter, or if you want, the clerk treasurer does have your letter because it was forwarded and asked to be read. And that was my understanding. You wish to have it be read through the clerk's office. So your choice to have that read, or unless you have different comments to make rather than the letter.
I would prefer to have it read by the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Micka. We'll move forward then. Clerk, is there other items or other persons? I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are. Wait. Okay. There's a Tyler Eagle has been enabled.
Tyler?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right,
Your Honor,
and
there's a person by the name of M. Paled.
That's Monroe County Radio.
Yep, so I doubt that's a comment.
Thank
you, Councilman.
There's one more person. There's a Bill Lavoie, so I will enable. Bill Lavoie has been enabled.
Mr. Lavoie, do you have a comment?
My comment isn't about this subject. It's more about the political sign. So I live 225 Maywood, City of Monroe, 48162. My issue is about the political signs. I'm noticing they're starting to pop up in the terrace area, the rights of way, and there's some that look to be too large. It seems like every cycle there's 4x4 signs that pop up in residential areas of the city. And I just wanted to let the city council know that I've seen 3 of them today, 1 4x4 and 2 smaller ones that were in the public rights of way. So, you know, just whatever kind of outreach can be done or enforcement, because I consider them a lot of times visual obstructions. And so that's my take on it as a former and current candidate running for office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lavoie. Just to, and I guess for those that are listening or may have an interest, you know, there is a residential square footage that's permitted and a commercial square footage on campaign signs. I think what Mr. Lavoie is referring to is that those the commercial signs are starting to show up on residential lots, and it's too large. So we'll follow up on that and on other ones as well. Clerk Treasurer Lavoie.
All right, disable talking. All right, so I'm just going to stop on enable Monroe County Radio and Pallid in case that there are any comments that she would like to make.
Any comments? I see this muted, so if it doesn't go unmuted, I'll say take that there's not comments. And Pallid. We can move forward, clerk.
All right. And we'll also do the same for WXYZ TV. They've been enabled.
Any comments from WXYZ? I see none. It's still muted. Clerk, we'll move forward.
All right, now, and Matt and Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the other names on there are department heads.
There's one
Julie D.
TRA.
Is that Julie D? They have their hand raised.
There's that, and Trey TRA above Tyler Eagle.
Okay, I didn't see it. So Julie D has her hand raised. I'll go to Julie D and Abel, and then.
Okay, Julie D, you're back. Okay, I see you're unmuted. So Julie, if you could state your name, residence, and your comments, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Julie Dye. I am a resident of Dowagiac, Michigan. I'm a citizen and elder of the Pokagon Band Potawatomi Nation. Monroe, Michigan actually happens to be part of my tribe's ancestral territory. And I would just like to say that this monument is just as hurtful now as it was years ago when my relatives and ancestors protested it. And people, we don't, and you don't, nobody goes to a park to be educated. You go to a university, a library, a museum, or you speak to your elders. This man is not my hero. He's not any of my relatives' hero. And we, as a people, the indigenous people of Michigan, we're here first. We were once the majority. Now we're less than 2% of the population, thanks to people like George Custer, a genocidal murderer. So that's all I have to say. Please remove this hurtful statue and get it out of the public square where my people don't have to go look at a murderer. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Clerk Lavoie. Next.
Right. And then 1 second. All right. It's Trey TRA.
Trey, you have comments this evening. Yes, you're unmuted. Your name, please, and residence.
My name is Trey. I'm from Monroe.
Yes.
I just think like it's very bold of Monroe to have that statue there. History aside, I mean, realistically, Custer's legacy is white. It's up for debate by most historians. I mean, there's articles from the 80s comparing his historical significance on par to a banana peel. And that's history. But, you know, just humanly looking at it, you had Hitler in the Holocaust, and it was completely erased, not justified by anybody, you know, at the majority of the table. Like, it just makes no sense that we have a statue of a murderer, a rapist, just somebody that represents everything evil in the world in Monroe, really. That's it.
All right, Trey, thank you for your comments. Clerk Treasurer Lavoy.
All right, I don't see anyone else.
And neither does Mr. Buds, as he's watching, and Mr. Cochran does not as well.
All right.
So I think we will.
Do you want me to read the emails?
Oh,
Your
yes,
Honor?
thank you. That was there was, I think you said 3 letters or emails, and we'll read those into the record that were requested. And then we'll go back around to the council if there's any follow-up.
All right, I will start with Mr. Richard Micka, City of Monroe, Michigan. My name is Richard Micka. I reside at 47 East Elm Avenue, Monroe, Michigan. Recent activities across the country have led to disenfranchisement of long-standing traditions and threaten to obscure local heritage. In particular, there is a movement in progress to defame the Custer Monument without just cause. Elizabeth Bacon Custer, Libby, sought to cherish her husband's memory with a fitting memorial. The monument she sought was generic in nature, commemorating not only her husband's selfless sacrifice, but that of those volunteers who served under him in the Michigan Cavalry Brigade at the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War. Great pains were taken in the selection of a sculptor and his mount. The horse depicted, Roanoke, was captured by Custer in a daring raid behind enemy lines and shot out from under him at Gettysburg. This clearly illustrates the intent of those charged with the depiction of the equestrian monument. The message is one of gallantry and heroism in a time of great adversity, nothing more. Not only the local community, but the entire country has seen fit to recognize monuments of this caliber on the National Register of Historic Places. There is a significant presence that cannot be denied. Those who would denigrate the history of this town do so only to generate unwarranted contempt for its people and institutions. Then the next one is from Lowell Smith, Geraldine, Alabama. I would first like to state that I'm in favor of the statue remaining in place. It has been stated by many of those who oppose the Custer statue that George Custer committed genocide against Native Americans. Others have said he killed and raped thousands of Native Americans. Genocide is defined as the deliberate and systematic extermination of a national, racial, political, or cultural group. There is not one credible historical source that he ever did such a thing or that he advocated such. There is evidence in his own writings that he essentially said he didn't blame the natives for wanting to roam the free and open plains of the American West, and that he would want to do the same if he were them. George Custer has been made the poster boy for the 19th century Indian policy of the United States government. He has been so because of his Civil War fame and because of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Indian fighters such as George Crook, Ronald McKenzie, and Nelson Miles could be charged with more casualties among natives, but no one recognizes those names. Custer participated in 2 engagements against Native Americans that could be classified as battles. In 1873, he participated in a small skirmish near the Yellowstone River in which there were few casualties on either side. His losses at the Little Bighorn total more than the native casualties combined in his 2 battles with them. At the Battle of the Washita, he was informed that women were being shot during the action. He immediately issued orders for that to be stopped. His troops captured more than 50 Native women. If he pursued a policy of genocide, why did he just not have them executed? The statue in Monroe portrays Custer at the Battle of Gettysburg, where he was instrumental in saving the rear of the Union lines from a charge by Confederate General Jeb Stuart on the 3rd day of a battle, while the Confederate General George Pickett was assaulting the Union front line. Custer was fighting on the side of the Union to abolish slavery. That should be remembered. It should also be remembered it is no more fair to judge people of a culture of 150 years than it will be for people of 150 years from now to judge us by their culture and not our own. Thank you, Lowell Smith. All right. 1 second.
Yes.
All right, the third one that I have is from, I believe it's from George Custer. There's also a Chip Custer written on it, so it's from the Custer family. The petition before the City Council to remove the statue of General Custer in downtown Monroe has come to my attention. The basis for the removal appears to be his supposed racism and his genocidal disposition towards American Indian tribes. Both are charges brought by an uninformed public. Custer is the target of unsubstantiated charges is not surprising because it is nothing new. I would challenge anyone to submit credible evidence to either charge. It should be apparent to all that if you want to oversimplify the complicated dynamic between Western expansion and the removal of the tribes from their native lands, just simply fold it up into a neat little box and call it Custer. This uncomplicated tactic has worked for years now. Name the most famous Indian fighter you can think of and accuse him of the myriad of atrocities that took place during our 250-year period of unrest and war with all of the tribes, starting on the East Coast and sweeping westward. General Custer frequently wrote about his feelings toward the American Indian plight and how he wouldn't want to be forced upon a reservation. He stated if he were an Indian, he would desire to be free to roam upon the plains. His writings and quotes on the subject are numerous and easy to find for those that seek the truth. It doesn't make you a racist if you're a U.S. soldier fighting against an enemy at the time of the United States government. U.S. Army commanders did not haphazardly take to the field and select targets on their own. They followed their orders, which ultimately originated with their government. In the heat of combat, as at the Washita, there are non-combative casualties. When informed of a few of his men firing on the innocents, the general immediately put a stop to it. Over 50 women and children were taken prisoner after the fighting. Wouldn't a genocidal maniac simply have done away with them? It's easy for people in our current age to be critical of a time they never grew up in. It's also easy to criticize events that occur during the fog of war, especially by people who have never been near one. Generations of Custers grew up in Monroe, and 4 men in particular would be horrified to learn of this proposal. All are gone now, and all served with distinction over a period of 3 wars. 3 were full colonels, 2 won the Silver Star for gallantry in combat. None would stand for this, and none have ever raised their children to be anything but respectful to all. In conclusion, it is the height of intellectual laziness to criticize conduct of 19th century citizens and soldiers using a new standard we have set in our 21st century, especially when the criticism is unfounded. General Custer has become the poster boy for all wrongs committed against the American Indians during our roughly 250 years as a nation. Many atrocities were committed by many government administrations, citizens, soldiers, and even tribe against tribe. The attempted genocide and/or removal of the different tribes is a sad part of our collective history as a nation. General Custer, is represented in this statue, fought bravely with his 4 regiments of Michigan cavalry at the battlefield of Gettysburg and saved the rear of the Union lines while Pickett was attacking the front. Many brave Michiganders died in doing so. Let that stand for what it is and stop attempting to make the general out for something he wasn't. The Custer name stands for honor, duty, and country, and nothing more. And those are the emails that I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, Clerk. That was under 3 minutes because to make sure that we stay, that was actually at 2:48. Thank you.
You're welcome. And no one else has raised a hand. So
Okay.
I believe and no one has been added to the attendee list as far as I can tell.
So as far as citizens' comments, I think that we'll move forward. And I know that the council had an interest to listen to all the presentations. I will say there were emails that I've received that were not asked to be read, and they did not provide their location, so therefore they are not being read. Some have asked those to be sent on to council. They may be coming your way as well. So before that, I'm going to give the council an opportunity if they have any final comments as we move forward. Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm wondering if you or the city manager plan on scheduling a discussion on this at some point in the future. And if that is the case, I I think there are certain people we would probably like to invite to such a discussion or would request comment from, those being many of the native peoples, the Potawatomi, perhaps the Wyandot of Anderdon, and the Cheyenne and Arapaho were affected by what's being discussed. Any historians that have written books on the subject, and certainly of Custer, there are many. The County Historical Society, the State Historical Society, since the monument itself, I think, says it was erected by the state of Michigan. If they would like to come speak and provide a neutral account of what they feel had happened. If the proposal is to move the statue to a museum, perhaps the County Historical Museum should be involved in that discussion as well. And then the Custer family, of course. So I think that there is a lot of people who have an interest in having this conversation. And if you or the city manager sought to have that conversation, I think at the very least there are some individuals, and probably many others who I have not listed, that by all rights should be invited to have one. I think that when we have an opportunity to speak with one another as a society, and especially any decisions that are being made by our government, that it's certainly critically important that we all have a say, and that in that marketplace of ideas, that we get whatever we can from whatever evidence is out there. Any decision that's going to be made or not made by a government, I think should be taken seriously. I think we all do here, but I would not want to make any decision regarding anything with such gravity without any supporting evidence. I certainly would not allow that from any of our department heads to be proposed. I mean, Director Lewis had to undergo questioning for the 2 dump trucks he wanted purchased this evening, and the purpose thereof, and the age in which they were in service with us. I don't think that we're going to make decisions quickly. I think that there's certainly voices that need to be heard before we move in any direction. That's certainly probably going to be a disappointment to hear, but government is full of process, and we invite you to be part of that moving forward, I suppose.
Thank you, Councilman. I think that this was the opportunity that has risen here at this time for us to take comments from the public. I think there are steps that can be taken. I'm not sure if the city manager will have comments at the conclusion or not, but I know that in discussion talking about, just as you said, it takes informed decision making. And I think there's aspects that others that from tribal nations, but also facts and participation that come to a conclusion that can be. I'm going to have some comments in a broad perspective, but I think there's the opportunity as we get back to our next meeting coming in the 1st of July, and we have the extra Monday this month, that there may be opportunity for administration to make some of those outreaches and talk about how we come to a discussion on this, so we are fully informed and understand what it is and what it takes and where it would be, and type things along that lines if there was a movement forward. I'm going to continue moving through the council, and then I'll make my comments overall at the end. Councilwoman Whitman, any comments?
Well, I just wanted to send my regrets to the family of Deputy Young, and prayer for Renee Peterson. And as far as for the General Custer statue, I've never even entertained the thought that it shouldn't be there. So, you know, I'm going to have to think on it for a while before I know exactly how that, before I decide if it's possible that it's a problem. I don't see it as an issue myself. So I know that in Monroe, almost every teenager has some story to tell about the Custer statue. We used to have court dances and people would meet at the Custer statue. It's our landmark. Not that we couldn't get a different one, but you know, it's part of our history. So I'm going to have to think about it before I really give a straightforward opinion. I'm trying to be open-minded to the people that were on that petition. But I'm having a little bit of a problem getting to that point. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Michelangelo, any final comments? Muted, sir. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
No, Your Honor, I don't have any comments.
Okay. Councilman Germain, any final comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman. No. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Vining. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the screen instead of thinking numbers.
Well, Your Honor, anytime you get 10,000 signatures, I mean, that's saying something. But I will say I moved here about 20 years ago, and I've always heard negative connotations towards the statue. Personally, I don't like the statue. It's not about my personal feelings. There's other relics in the city, in my opinion, that could be removed as well. This is the one that the people chose to focus on. But I can say, when my years back attending Monroe Community College and dealing with some of the Native American people, it has especially, and for many African Americans as well, because there were Black Indians as well who were persecuted during that time. And so I know that it is a source of contention. Everybody teaches their children differently, and whereas some of us might drive by the statue and say, what a great man, others of us ride by the statue and shake our heads, and it invokes trauma and PTSD and all types of other negative feelings. I'd personally like to know, how do we as a council, what authority do we have to answer one way or another to petitions such as this? I'll just state for the record that I personally cannot stand to see the statue, but there's been petitions. I haven't seen any with this much fervor that has reached the council, but I've heard this talk for 20 years now. So, but I would like to see if the city attorney can, or the city manager could explain to me, what authority do we even have as a council to answer this petition one way or the other?
I'll look to either the manager or Mr. Buds. I know that this was went through the Michigan legislature with some funding and was given to the city of Monroe for keeping and the future forever. That's the short answer I can give. I'm looking for either of them for anything
Your
specific.
Honor,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, before you go on, I'd like to give my condolences to the young officer's family. So tragic, younger than my own children, and just such a tragedy, and just wanted to offer my condolences to the family.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
I don't know, Vince, Mr. Pastou or Mr. Budge, any clarification for that and how this might, if any comments?
I don't know the answer to it. I'll look to the city attorney and see if he has one.
Your Honor, I will say I do not have the answers to that as we sit here today. A few things I would want to look at, obviously, are the when it was dedicated, and the I'll say any strings that did or didn't come along with that. I guess for purposes of a bit of history, I think many people on this call or meeting know that it has been in several different locations over time, and so certainly there's a mechanism for movement. We can all say that from historical knowledge of it being in different places, and I think for the most part the discussion tonight has centered around a move to another location. So certainly I think that there has to be a way for that based on historical precedent, and I'd be happy to look further into other issues relating.
Thank you, Mr. Budd. So, Councilwoman, that's a task in which they'll take on to see. I would think at some point it would require the council's action and approval to do so, but we'll make sure we have that information as we move forward. Thank you, Councilwoman Vining. Now, Councilwoman Germaini.
Thank you, Your Honor. I had heard
that there was a petition going around to keep the statue as well. And I don't know if anyone else has heard that as well or seen it. I have not personally seen it, but I invite the discussion, and I would like to hear all arguments from both sides before. I'm not prepared to make any decisions until I have a well-informed conscience on both sides. Personally, I can't make a decision on that, but I am open to the discussion, and I know we will, as a council, have some very constructive conversation. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Yes, there is, as I've learned, there were two change.org petition drives. One was for the removal of the Custer monument. The other was to retain and keep it where it was. So as they are the petitions that go out. So I'm just confirming what you're asking. Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, I definitely oppose any kind of action taken upon the statue. I think that history clarification needs to be made to everyone, and everyone needs to come together and get together and see exactly what General Custer did. The actions that people are talking about were directives from the United States government, in which he carried out as Colonel Custer, I believe. And what we see at the corner of Monroe and Elm Avenue is General Custer, and in light of his engagement in the Battle of Gettysburg, in which he turned the tide of that engagement. Had he not been there, had he not done what he did, there's a good chance that the Civil War would have went the other way, and we'd have two different sets of states, the Confederate States of America and the United States of America. So I look at it from a sense of preserving our First Amendment rights as well. So let's put a little bit of historical thought into this before we get out of character and think about something that we would regret for the rest of our lives for making, in my opinion, a tragic move upon history, which we should not forget. And that is that he did save the United States of America during the Civil War. He was a hero, a national hero, and he is the landmark of Monroe. So, I mean, I guess my other suggestion would be, what would be next? You know, we have Washington Street. We need to change the name of Washington. Where does it stop? That's my next question after that. So I do oppose this, but however, I do would love to entertain the further discussion with historical people like Bill Saul, Richard Micka, Steve Alexander, many people within our community that can handle those questions, and people of the Potawatomi tribes and other tribes that were involved in the Custer engagements. I would love to entertain those discussions, because I think they are good, and I think that they bring out the historical factors that were necessary to be heard. And that's it, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Moore. Councilman Michelangelo, I saw you might have had your hand up, and I think I'll give you a chance there to come back before I speak. Councilman Michelangelo.
Thanks, Your Honor. I guess the comment that I have is, I understand we have a petition signed by 10,000 people, and I know that petition has some fuel behind it relative to the situations that's occurred in the United States over the last couple of weeks, prompted by the killing of George Floyd. But I just want to point out to council, 12 United States presidents, almost 1/4 of the United States presidents were slave owners. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, President Monroe. We have a statue in front of the county courthouse erected 3 years ago with the President Monroe. Are we going to take that statue down? I think you have to take a look at the historical context and not be a revisionist. And actually, based on what Councilman Felder said about getting everybody together, actually, this is an educational moment and maybe something that the community college could facilitate, rather in terms of having a symposium on the pros and the cons, or the discussion on Custer, his impact on Native American tribes, his contribution to the Civil War, in terms of, at least as a community, discussing all of the ramifications, all the pros and the cons, before any actions are taken. Because I think we go back in history, we can find something about a lot of our leaders that doesn't gel correctly today, that we'd have to take issue with. But that's part of our legacy as Americans. So I just wanted to point that out. We're focused on Custer. We've had 12 United States presidents that were slave owners. And so how far are we going to go? But I think we have to go, we have to apply some education and some historical context before we make a decision like this. That's all I have to say, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilman. I have some comments I guess I'll make. So, it's been 110 years since the Custer mining has been given to the city of Monroe, and it's had, as was mentioned, moved now in 3 locations: downtown Lodger Square, Soldiers and Sailors, and now at the location where it currently sits. Perspectives over the past century are changing and looking beyond maybe the original intent, recognition of the past and the period of time that we're in. The Civil War service alone is what the purpose and intent of was putting that there. But I think the public and many are looking for a broader and fuller scrutiny on that. So, I think about the discussion, I have to go back to some of the comments because I think that there's things that occur around us that we just don't see sometimes. So I'm going to talk about the River Race National Battlefield Park. Yes, Custer wasn't alive when that occurred, but I think some of the initiatives and steps that the city of Monroe with the National Park Service, with the foundation board and leadership in our community across broad perspectives have brought some of this discussion together already. And the battlefield is not the location for the Custer Monument because it's a different time era. And it would not have a place there if it was to be moved. But that's secondary comment. So when we started the initiative with the River Race National Battlefield Park, the National Park Service, the Foundation Board, and I looking around at Councilman Michelangelo was involved in some of those initial steps as well. It was that all stories will be told. All participants will be told in the full capacity of, it wasn't of how they were impacted. From that war, of course, became the Relocation Assimilation Acts, and things that happened to the Native Americans, and they were removed from these locations. I think we heard some of those that their ancestors would have been here. Those stories will be told out at the national park, and they already are. The journey toward understanding, which I was fortunate to be able to join with Dr. Kojo, the president of Eastern Michigan University, high school curriculum writers, the National Park Service and others to go and meet with the Wyandotte tribe and the elders there. Since then, they are coming back here, retracing their history back to our location, and also now bringing the youth, and we're making continuing. From that, there's also been writing the curriculums in the high schools to speak to the Native Americans. So I bring this up because I think there's some comments that are harsh that think that we're not doing things within the community. And I know it's not the Custer Monument, but I just lay this as a foundation for where I go and what I think about this. I think there is opportunity to have that discussion, as Councilman Michelangelo stated. I think there's the opportunity, just like we already have with the Wyandotte tribe, about continuing that. You can go to Dundee and see that the expansion of the national park includes the Native American lands. 6 points in the Wyandotte tribe that are being up in Gibraltar, and our participation in support of that. And we could go on. So I think people should take a pause to learn, and I think this is the opportunity to do so. When I think about the Custer Monument, it stands there on the corner, and at one time there were 3 markers identifying what Custer was or what the monument was. One was on the back of the monument, and when it was cleaned, it was removed because it wasn't there originally and should not be there. The 2 that are there are a state marker and a county marker, and yet it doesn't speak only to the intent why it was placed there. So when you open that up and talk about him being killed at the Little Bighorn, it says in his service, so to speak, and there's a gap. There's a gap from when he left the Civil War to the times of the gap of when he met his demise there at the Little Bighorn and was killed. So that's the story that should be out there as well. I think it should be full perspective of not only the Civil War time, since we're embracing all and things are changing, tell truly what the story is equally. whether it's at the current location or the future. But I think there's an opportunity to reach out to the Native American tribes that were mentioned. We have a relationship with the Wyandotte tribe. The Potawatomi is being discussed in their role here within our region at the River Raisin National Battlefield Park. I strongly recommend those that have an interest in learning, make an appointment with the park superintendent, Scott Bentley, and he will tell you what the philosophy is. There are atrocities across our world, in our country, there's no question, and you just can't bypass it without some conversation. So looking at the city manager, I think there's an opportunity, whether it's as Councilman Felder said, or to have the administration start some of the outreach to find those that can host and have the discussion. Then once we're fully informed and think about this is when we should be taking action. We shouldn't just moving quickly through a petition. I do appreciate the fact that there are the 2 petitions and providing background and information. So I'm going to close there with my comments because I know my time is up as well. And I think that this is not coming to a conclusion today. There's not motions, it's not action, but I think it lays a path to have some of this done. So I want to thank those that weighed in from the council, those that called in with their comments as we start to visit this in a full perspective, just as we are in a full perspective of telling all stories at our national park. I will close at that comment, and then I don't think there's other comments this evening. So with that, it's an adjournment. I'm sorry, Mr. Pastu has a comment, I believe.
Your Honor, thanks. I think there's just a couple of follow-ups from earlier. I think if Chief McCormick is still on, I think going back to Ashley's inquiry, if he could just give a quick update on that.
That'd be great if we could get this today. That'd be wonderful. Chief McCormick, I will see if you're on and we can get you to speak.
You must have called in.
He had sent me a text. Essentially, there is a report of that incident that Ashley talked about. And so we'll follow up on it with council and certainly with Ashley as well.
I appreciate him getting back so quickly during this meeting.
And then Mr. Buds, I think, had a comment that he wanted to make as well.
Okay, Mr. Buds.
Your Honor, I just wanted to say thank you to the mayor and council for their continued relationship with my role as the city attorney, and obviously an exciting new chapter for me. Wanted to thank you all for your support of that, and look forward to working through a lot of the issues that we talked about tonight and many others as well. So thank you.
It was a tough vote, man.
Yeah, I missed the vote, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Oh, you didn't vote?
Well, I was out. Anyways, doesn't matter. Virtual meetings, but I do support it, so thank you. Looking to, I guess, with no other comments, a motion would be in order to
adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Whitman to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Angeli,
Yes.
Vining,
Yes.
Jermaine,
Yes.
Gilmore,
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes, thank you all, and thank you for the conversation from all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. It was nice seeing y'all.